We're going to begin this session with something of a recap following the Lambs of Isaac and their individual time spent in Rome before heading out. They had been on the trail of the thief who had led them through certain investigations on a trail out of Rome into the Swiss Alps. Ambrogino Giovanni apparently was the one responsible for the Camarilla's loss of its valued property deep within the Vatican. And so the Lambs of Isaac prepared to set out, hiring the British mercenary Toby Entwistle, who has some knowledge of the area, who refused to go along with the Giovanni in their search for mercenaries. So before we begin, I'd like to go around and find out what everyone is doing in preparation for their leaving. We're going to begin with Guerman de Gascoigne. Guerman, the time comes soon when you must leave Rome, as you and Matteo know that it's time to move once again to be on the trail of your enemy, a very old and familiar state of affairs. How does Guerman go about preparing for this? Is there anything he wishes to do before he leaves?
Gaiman is preparing himself both physically and mentally for what is to come. The unknown with the Giovanni is a trifling matter. So he prepares himself for what he knows will ultimately end in combat. He has his claymore on his back, strapped tight, with his one-handed falchion strapped to his hip. He seems fairly well dressed. Leathers atop of a very decorative French tunic, but when he moves, the sound of chainmail can be heard muffled beneath the cloth. As he sits in one of the armchairs, he seems to be staring at a wooden cross. He seems to be saying nothing, no prayers, no muttering of soft Latin blessings beneath his breath, just seems to be staring at it. Fury is starting to build in his eyes, but it is a very calm and quiet fury, almost as if a storm was brewing, and he seems to just be preparing himself mentally as he stares at it.
And we will smoothly segue into Diego Vasquez de Sevilla. Diego, you find yourself fairly hungry and know that there are a few things that you have to set in order before leaving Rome. Go ahead and tell us how Diego goes about doing that.
Diego wants to make sure, first of all, that the mortal needs of the ghouls are met, as they're going to a rather cold part of the world. So, during the daylight hours, he makes sure that his ghoul goes and buys some warm clothing for everyone. Enough food to last the journey, because they still have mortal needs, despite their need for blood, just the same.
Alfonso does so. In fact, he's happy to do so. He takes off for the market of Rome during the day in the Via Fortina, and he purchases heavy cloaks, woolen cloaks, and sturdy boots, good clothing for the rough weather that's ahead of them.
Diego himself also asked Alfonso to pick up a fur-lined cloak, more for the look of it. It just wouldn't do for him to be wandering through the wastes wearing nothing but a silk shirt.
He's
People would
happy to
talk.
do so, of course. In fact, there are many beautiful and luxurious furs in Rome. Um, with the right amount of coin, you could buy just about anything. What sort of fur cloak does Diego want to wear?
He really doesn't care if it's anything fancy. He'll take even bear or wolf.
All right. So, with your instructions, Alfonso departs to carry them out.
Meanwhile, Diego stays at home and attempts to make peace with himself. His emotions have been rather in a flurry lately, and his revelations to Bianca haven't helped to improve his mood, only to make them feel less weighty.
And as you stay at the house and come to terms with your tumultuous feelings, Diego, the hunger is hot in the back of your throat, pricking you to action as the beast grows stronger beneath the simmering subconscious of your mind. Does Diego stir to satiate his hunger, or does he stew with it?
He almost feels as though he deserves this hunger. But in the end, as the beast always does, the beast wins. And maybe 2 to 3 hours from dawn, he will decide to finally go out and see if he can get himself something.
All right, and as Diego departs the house to walk through the streets of Rome, where do you intend to hunt?
He stays away from the river as he's had little success with that. He'll instead wander toward one of the poorer districts.
It doesn't take long before you find yourself in the Aventine section of the city. That hill most famous for its ghettos and slums, particularly the Jewish quarter that winds around. However, you did remember the look in Adoniah Ben Reuven's face as you stood before him and he talked about being a protector of his people, and that memory alone kind of steers you away from the Jewish quarter. As there was something stormy and terrible about that man. Besides, there are plenty of pickings elsewhere in the Aventine. Go ahead and make a wits alertness roll. Difficulty will be 5. It takes you little to no effort to find and subdue prey this time of morning, even though not many people are out and about. You actually manage to capture a baker's apprentice who was on his way to the shop long before the sun had risen in the sky. You can tell because of his apron and his clothes and the cart that he was carrying full of sacks of flour that he was quickly hurrying along. Go ahead and describe this feeding as Diego accosts this young man.
Diego actually waits in the mouth of an alleyway, and when the man is about to pass by, he steps out and unleashes upon him the force of his awe, as he knows he might have to spend blood in order to get it. He doesn't want to wrestle this man into the alleyway.
All right, spend a blood point and roll your charisma performance, difficulty 7. You bend this unfortunate man to your will just as easily as you might lead a child along by the nose. As he immediately, you see his expression go slack and his eyes go wide, and he seems very interested in you. He begins asking questions about you, forgetting even his cart.
And Diego is all too willing to engage him in conversation, being sure as he does so to lead him back towards the mouth of that alleyway where they won't be seen.
You do so, and the shadows envelop the both of you.
Almost casually, while they're chatting, Diego leans against the wall, very close to the man, whom he's sure won't mind, due to his power over him.
The man seems a little taken off guard by your sudden forwardness, but he's just so fascinated by you, he can't take his eyes off of you. He doesn't know why he's so drawn to you.
And Diego will actually take him by the chin gently and turn his head away. And almost too quick for the man to see, he moves in and sinks his fangs into his throat.
Signore, what? He gasps as you sink your fangs deep into his flesh and that hot, sweet blood rushes into your mouth. It's plain. You can tell this man is from simple stock by feeding from him. But it's clean blood. He lives a very clean, wholesome life. And it is sweet and rich and full-bodied as you begin to drink. Diego, as soon as you taste that warm blood after such a length of abstinence and your hunger is so sharp in your mind, make a self-control roll, difficulty 5. You easily crush any notions the beast has howling in your subconscious to feed to your satisfaction, to drain every last drop out of this man's body. Unless, of course, you have other intentions.
He does not. He'll only take enough to satiate the hunger.
Alright, so how much would you like to take?
3.
The man will be very weak, and you know for certain that he will miss work today. He will perhaps even be sick. But he will live, most certainly. He's completely unconscious, however, slumped against you when your fangs finally break away from his flesh.
Diego feels a pang of pity for him suddenly. He'll actually take a few coins and press them into his hand, and then head out to the street and bring the cart closer so that the flour won't be stolen.
And as you make an effort to give the young man recompense for his time and his blood, Diego, make a conscience roll, difficulty 8. All right, with that, make a self-control roll, difficulty 8.
Ten again on that?
Oh no, that's sufficient. I'll relay the results of that roll. All right.
Diego is a little taken aback by the strength of his emotion about this man. And as such, he decides there'll be no more human blood for him tonight, despite his hunger. He'll try to find maybe a stray dog or two.
That is, at the same time, far easier and far more difficult, as animals seem to shy away from you instinctively, and you have no powers to lure them to you. Still, the streets of Rome are littered with cats. It's unbelievable how many cats are in Rome, but there are dogs as well. Would you prefer hunting? Well, in order to get satiation, you'll have to hunt for several cats or perhaps one very large dog.
He feels no pity for cats. He never did like them in life, and he doesn't like them now, so he doesn't feel bad about leaving a pile of bodies.
All right, physically you are more than capable of catching any cat. Finding them, however, proves to be a bit more of a task. Roll Wits Alertness, difficulty 7. All right. After wandering the Aventine for half an hour or so, you come across several in an alleyway and down the further street, feeding on garbage and soiling the streets with their urine and their filth and their stink, and the sounds of the cats fill the air. Go ahead and describe Diego as he goes about this grisly task of feeding upon animals for the first time in a very, very long time.
First, he marvels at how far he's fallen to allow his emotions to rule him so much that he'd feed on the blood of lowly animals. Then again, he is hungry, and what that man made him feel, he does not want to feel again tonight. So he actually draws his rapier from his belt, and he'll make it quick. He moves into animals who are busy feeding or doing what they're doing, planting the tip of the rapier through a kidney here or a neck there, and quickly leaning in to pick up the bodies and drain them dry.
You kill them swiftly, and the blood goes cold just as fast. And as you squeeze the blood from their small bodies, wringing them almost in your hands, the taste of the blood is acrid and foul. It's terrible.
Dios mío, he says around another gulp.
In fact, you have to kill 3 cats and drain them completely to gain sustenance enough for even 1 blood point. How much do you continue feeding in this way?
He'll take 8 or 10 if he can find them.
It takes some time to get that many. In fact, once you start killing and feeding them, they tend to shy away from you, instinctively wary of your presence, don't seem to be fully cognizant of what you're doing to their fellows as you leave one wrung and crushed body after another in the alleyway, squeezed dry of blood. But you can, over time. And you do manage to squeeze another 3 blood points out of the stray cats of Rome, although by the time you're done, their blood sits in your gullet like a lump of warm, disgusting, heavy lead. Your mouth is full of that bitter, acidic taste of their blood.
Feeling absolutely disgusted, but completely amused at the same time, he'll slump down against the wall and laugh almost manically to himself, with blood still staining his teeth.
And as you laugh, your laughter carries in the echoes of the alleyway. And an unfamiliar voice catches your attention. One moment. You hear first the clink of coin. It's an interesting sound, the clink and the jink of coin as it rattles along, and then the shuffling of feet. And then a voice.
Come to my part of the alleyways, little one?
Madame Cloaca. For this could be no other. You've heard of her by reputation, and she gives a phlegm-induced coughing laugh, joining you in your laughter. The beggar woman that calls herself Madame Cloaca, for that name means sewer, appears to be a shambling mound of filth, stained rags and scraps, approximately 5 feet tall, the darkness beneath her hood pierced by a single bright eye peering out of the darkness. From somewhere within the mass can be heard the jingle of coin, that recognizable jingle, and the slow shuffle slide of a dragged foot beneath the tattered veil of her clothing. She smells, certainly, as if she were named with the odor of the sewer in mind. Those unfortunate enough to actually gaze upon her will see every last little detail of her filthy regalia as she slowly shuffles toward you, You suddenly feel a pang of revulsion go through you, Diego, as you look upon this creature hobbling awkwardly as it advances towards you.
Ah, you have a pair of strong young legs, don't you? Don't you have anything for poor Madame Cloaca?
That I do indeed, he says, and he'll actually climb to his feet. And he will heighten his senses to take her in. He does feel the revulsion, but at the same time, he is always the one for sensation.
You almost immediately regret heightening your senses, especially your sense of smell. She smells as a charnel house that was built within a sewer. She smells like shit and rotting bodies, and death comes out from underneath her rags, particularly from her hood, as though she were feeding from the dead. The smell is revolting. Diego, make a stamina roll, difficulty 6. Despite not being human any longer, the smell actually overwhelms you, and you know that if you were human, you would pitch the contents of your stomach onto the ground. But as it is, you can't help but gag.
Being overwhelmed as he is, he does dull down his sense of smell, although allowing his hearing and vision to remain sharp.
Madame Cloaca moves with a limp and a unfortunately feeble gait about her. Although, make a perception empathy roll, difficulty 7. You can immediately, well, actually I will relay the results of that.
Diego actually watches her with interest, but no fear.
You have perhaps enough coin for Madame Cloaca, Perhaps much more than what you gave the baker's boy.
And with that, she extends from beneath the mound of tattered rags a twisted, gnarled claw, which jerks and twitches at the joints of the fingers, almost beckoning insistently upon your jink.
There was a point not long ago where I got it in my head to look for you, Madame Cloaca. I was told about your penchant for information gathering.
Oh. Well. What an old woman can do to be flattered by such a handsome young man.
You are most impressive, Madame Cloaca, but the man before you is not young, I assure you.
Oh, but you are. But you so are. At least to me. Madame Cloaca has seen many years here in Rome. And you speak like one who is so young still. Feeding upon cats. Because something inside you cannot be resolved.
Diego actually looks surprised at that.
Poor young Cainite. But coin.
I will do you one better, madame. And he'll actually draw that stiletto that he carries from his belt and hold it out to her handle first. It was a gift to me from Sebastian Delacroix, an emissary from Paris to my city of Sevilla.
She reaches out and grabs the dagger, looking at it and turning it over.
Shiny, so shiny. Yes, this will suffice.
It vanishes within the tattered folds of her rags.
One question, Madame Cloaca, will answer for you.
Tell me what you know of the dangers of Augustus Giovanni.
Augustus Giovanni, Venetian necromancer, very powerful family. They trace their origins back to ancient Rome when Madame Cloaca was just like you. So young then. Yes, they were of the Jovan family. Jove was their god. In their temple they worshipped at altars of blood and bone, and Augustus found the secret to longevity, preserving him and his family through dark magics. In those days, Cainites ruled Rome openly, not like the nailed god they worship these nights. Augustus is very dangerous, young one. He can rip the soul from the body. He can speak to the dead, and they have many tales to tell. Madame Cloaca speaks to the dead too, you know. I spent centuries in a mass grave. It was lovely. I had so much company.
If Diego's surprised by her theatrics, he doesn't show it. He says instead, "Then I suppose it would not surprise you to know that one of his children has been sneaking around your city of late, stealing important artifacts."
Madame Cloaca knows this. Knows this very well. Very, very well. The Camarilla looking for him. Is that so? Perhaps you are working for your Camarilla masters,
I do not deny it.
Certainly, certainly. Augustus is very dangerous, young one. Far more dangerous since devouring the blood of the ancient. I would admonish you not to trifle with him directly, and even less so his family. After all, you do not want to lose that beautiful young face.
No, but all the same, trifle with them I must. And, if it would please you, madame, I was there when he drained that antediluvian.
How fascinating. Indeed, you are someone very special, young one. The lords of the Camarilla would take such interest in you. I begin to see why. But that is no more. Your offerings have run dry, and I demand more should further discourse you want.
Again, that claw extends, jerking impatiently for more.
I would give you all I have if I knew you could help. He looks leery.
Madame Cloaca looks tempted for a moment. She pauses as though to think.
I have heard many things about the goings-on in this city. About the Black Monastery. The road to Basel. If you would offer Madame Cloaca a sufficient offering, I would be very happy indeed to share what I know with such a handsome young man.
I carry very little coin, unfortunately. I do have my sword, he says with some trepidation, looking down at it at his belt.
Pah! Gold! Bring Madame Cloaca gold. That is what I desire, young man. Do you not know when visiting an old lady to adorn her? Not with crude and foppish instruments of war.
Diego feigns a look of hurt at having his sword called thus. How much would it require, then?
Give all you have, and perhaps we shall see.
Diego's suddenly glad that he gave Alfonso some money to go and buy clothing, because if he gives her what he has now, he'll be penniless. All the same, he'll cut the purse free from its strings and hold it out to her.
Madame Cloaca snatches the bag of coins, perhaps a bit too quickly, untugging the strings open and pouring the coins out into her long, unnaturally long fingers. And though they roll and jink and clink in her single extended hand, not a single one drops to the ground. With such great dexterity she handles them.
This is acceptable. Well, I can tell thee that the Prince of Basel is a Cainite, a very young Cainite by my standards, though older than you, only just young one. His name is Manfred von Schur, and he protects what few Cainites remain within Basel. You see, the witch burnings have been very, very, shall we say, common as of late. The people of Switzerland see witches around every corner and burn them even if they are not there. Manfred von Schur protects his little court. I hear tell that there are perhaps only 7, 8 Cainites within Basel. But no matter. The real danger, other than the witch burnings, are the lupines. Yes. You have some familiarity with the moon beasts,
Only a passing familiarity, I'm afraid. My city is a dark city, not near to many forests.
It is paradise for the lupines. The Swiss Alps are such lovely, happy hunting grounds for them. Many are in that area, young one. It is Manfred von Schur who keeps them at bay. He is a warrior of no small skill, as you might imagine. But they are thick upon that road. They are more greatly agitated, I am given to understand, by the presence of the Black Monastery. What know you of this place?
She crooks a finger at you.
The Black Monastery.
I know that Ambrogino Giovanni, the childer I mentioned earlier, he nods, is gathering there with a group of Sabbat. For what purpose, I do not know.
Sabbat.
Sabbat, yes.
Rumors have placed it in the Schwarzwald, somewhere north of Basel. This is the greatest piece of information I can offer you, young one. No one, including your companions, I think, know where to find the Black Monastery. And should you blunder too long in the Swiss Alps, you would certainly run afoul of the lupines. Look in the Schwarzwald, north of Basel, on the slopes of Mount Dore. It is said that all of the monks are vampires. If this is true, I do not know. Madame Cloaca has not been there. You understand.
All the same, this information you give me is worth more than the gold I gave you. Is there anything else you require?
No.
She clinks her coins and pulls them into her robes.
I have gained sufficient wealth for now, young one. And our exchange is at an end. There is nothing else you have? You're quite certain?
Nothing else but my immortal soul. And if I could offer it to you, maybe I would.
Madame Cloaca, if only I could truck in such things, young one, I would be far richer a woman than I am. But it is time I should go. The sun's hateful rays will be upon Rome soon. I suggest you get back to the Palatine Hill as quickly as you can, young one. Dawn approaches. Yes.
And with that, she turns and, like a spider or an insect or something, with the gait of a cockroach fleeing the light, she turns and she just disappears down the alleyway and vanishes entirely.
All the same, Diego will say after her, should you ever find yourself in Hispania, your kind are always welcome in my city.
You receive no reply from her, at least none that you hear, other than the faint jinking of coin which carries down the alleyway. And you only hear that because your senses are heightened.
He grins to himself until he looks over at the pile of cats that he's built up. And his face once again turns to revulsion before he leaves this alleyway to head back to the Palatine Hill.
All right, and with that, we fade out on Diego after his chat with Madame Cloaca. And we move on to Bianca to kind of cover any preparations she might want to make before leaving Rome.
Bianca would definitely want to arrange transportation for them to head up to the Swiss Alps. Would they be able to fit in one carriage with all their belongings, or do you think two would be necessary?
It depends on how many belongings you mean to bring.
Well, she has a trunk, a chest of sorts that has her belongings in it, but that's pretty much it, just a trunk. Yes.
A wagon could carry a single trunk and still remain relatively unencumbered.
Okay, so one carriage and one wagon, or?
Well, I mean, I'm using the terms interchangeably. One carriage could carry a trunk, relatively unencumbered.
Okay, yes. Then she'll arrange for a carriage for them. She would also write a letter for Robert, explaining what, not in detail, but the quick gist of where she will be heading, and that she will try and keep in touch as much as possible and just reassuring him in the letter that everything will be all right, not to worry for her, and to keep an eye on Arnaldo, and that she will be in touch as soon as possible. And as she finishes this letter, she would seal it and have one of the servants deliver it to a messenger who will then deliver it to Naples.
And most of this takes most of the night actually to arrange, and you begin to appreciate the vulgarities of existence and how difficult it must be actually from night to night to arrange all of this, especially when you have so little time on your hands in which to get things done. But you do manage to motivate the servants to fetch and send these messages and get things, and all the while you see the British mercenary Toby Entwistle preparing for the journey. He is a little drunk after all this drinking, although he seems relatively steady on his feet for someone who has been drinking enough alcohol to choke a horse.
Bianca finds Toby somewhat humorous, but she pays him little mind as she's trying to get all of these things in order before they head out. She probably would also speak to the others about leaving word to Hardestat of what, at least the most important points that they discovered and where they're heading next. She does recall that he did say if anything of note transpires to leave word at the place they met him when they first arrived at Rome. He would leave servants there who could take the message.
All right, so you're having a message delivered to Casa Hardestat?
Yes. Well, she would obviously want to discuss it with the others first to see that they are in agreement with that, if they should or not.
And for everyone remaining at the house, which is actually just Gehrman at this point, would you agree that that's a good idea, Gehrman?
Absolutely. Gehrman would 100% agree with that, and he would even offer to write the note to leave. This is something he had already planned on doing himself.
All right, Bianca?
Once she has this discussion with Gehrman and he, in turn, decides to write the note for Hardestat, I believe there really is nothing else really she needs to do for the remainder of this evening. She already knows that everything's in order for the estate that they had rented in Rome. She's pretty sure Robert had already set money aside for the renter and all of that. So everything in terms of the house is taken care of. They're just, they can leave whenever everyone is set to leave. So she probably, for the remainder of the night, would stay in the company of Gehrman in the sitting room and Toby Entwistle from time to time when he comes in and out, when he's organizing his own things, keeping the conversation light as she tries to kind of prepare her mind for the journey.
All right, and with that, we segue smoothly into Valentino, who is returning to the house after a night of hunting, a very successful night indeed, although you are feeling somewhat hollow by the experience, Valentino, somewhat morose, although it's relatively easy to stuff that down once you catch sight of the manse up the street. You see that the doors are open and the servants are moving about in a flurry of activity. Apparently the orders to depart have been given, and you can see everyone within is already preparing to leave. You catch up with Gabrine on your way back, and he meets you with a lopsided grin.
Good evening, master. Did you enjoy your time at the party? You bring me something good?
Valentino is at first wordless. He does not return Gabrine's grin, and instead he maintains this somber expression as he wordlessly hands him a white mask as he asks for something. For 2 centuries, you have not failed me. And then 2 nights in a row you misstep. You'll understand if I might be concerned with this.
Gabreen's smile is struck from his face. Yes, master. He looks at the ground and follows after you.
This isn't Marseille, Gabreen. It's not all parties and women and being at the top here. There are more powerful forces at work in Rome and abroad, and I need your focus these next coming nights, now more than ever.
I will, master. I will endeavor to do a much better job. You would be very proud of me. I apologize.
He nods. Keep the mask. And he turns to enter the manor.
He turns the mask over in his hands, and that's the last you see of Gabreen, who remains outside on the lawn, alone with the mask to contemplate your words as you enter the manor. What does Valentino intend to do to prepare for his leaving Rome?
Before their departure, he's ensuring that his light brigandine is ready, preferring motion and versatility over anything that might slow him down in whatever is to come next. And he will also be bringing with him the restored Hungarian steel saber he used to end his sire so long ago. There is definitely an unresolved anger and conflict in Valentino, unable to entirely dispose of the memory of Lucinda or his fraying connection to the world around him. And this is particularly poignant when he returns to the room and is left alone with his thoughts. He's grown to hate Rome and is eager to see their task done and for some sense of closure, hoping that hunting down the Giovanni will bring that closure.
All right, and with that, we're going to engage in a bit of a montage. We see Gehrman preparing grimly before the cross that he murmurs soft prayers in Latin to, and Matteo standing just off to the side as he wraps his forearms in leather bindings and braces, as he buckles his belt tight and slings a bandolier of knives underneath his cloak. We see Diego making his way back to the Palatine Hill to avoid the rays of the sun. We see his face so full of expression at what has come and contemplating the information that he's gained. We see Bianca ordering servants about and looking concerned for what is to come, thinking perhaps of Robert. We see Valentino full of grim determination for their task, strapping his saber to his side, and we see the sheen of the steel as he sheathes it. The memory of beheading his sire with it so long ago, still fresh in his mind as though it were yesterday. And then the camera pans up high into the sky as we see the carriage being loaded up, and the lambs of Isaac ducking inside, away from the rays of the sun. Their ghouls fortifying the carriage against the daylight. The horses spurred onward as they depart Rome. And with that, we're going to shift scene. The four of you awake the next dusk and immediately all of you subtract 1 blood point from your pools as you rise for the next evening. You have been traveling for the entire day within the confines of the carriage together. It's very intimate but comfortable. Bianca did acquire a carriage that was that would be comfortable to accommodate 4, and it was of course sun-proofed. Heavy black satin curtains cover wooden shutters on the heavy black satin curtains hang on the inside, while wooden shutters protect the outside. Originally designed to shield from a bandit's arrow, but working just the same to protect from the sun. Everyone go ahead and make a private humanity roll. Guillermin de Gascoigne, you are the first to awaken this evening as you open your eyes and you lose a blood point and see your companions slumped over in the confines of the carriage in your sleep. The first thing that comes to you is the wind, which batters against the creaking of the carriage as it moves along. The mountain wind howls outside, and you know that you are indeed very far from Rome in the 8 hours or perhaps even 9 hours since you've left. Go ahead and describe Gehrman as he rises from torpor for the evening.
When Gehrman rises, he's looking around the carriage. He looks at all 3 of his companions, and then quickly rushes to one of the windows to peer outside to see exactly where they are and how much progress they have made.
You have to actually move the black satin of the curtain aside and open the wooden shutters, but it's easily done as there is a latch from the inside which allows you to do so. And as you open up the window, immediately an icy blast of air hits you full in the face. As you peer outward, you see that the carriage is upon a mountain road and is traveling along. There's thick snow upon the ground outside, and the flakes of snow actually hit your cold face and do not melt immediately, although it does, into tiny droplets of water which roll down your face as you peer outward. The wind and the cold would actually be very painful if you were still alive, so biting it is. But you realize that your undead state, you feel little, if no pain. But the sight that greets you is one of awe, as you are essentially looking down from a mountaintop, and you see the vast Italian landscape stretching out before you, blanketed in a very thick fog, as though you were even above the clouds themselves, traveling along the Swiss Alps.
Gehrman shouts out of the window, loud enough to pierce the wind at this high altitude. "Matteo!"
Instantly, Matteo is at your side. He's actually riding one of his horses, or one of the horses that were provided for him, as he spurs up, and in the saddle, he's a fairly skilled rider. You see his cloak is bundled very thickly around him. You see only his face and his beard beneath the hood of his cloak as it whips very strong as the winds and the currents buffet him against the side of the carriage, although he does a good job of keeping his steed under control.
My lord, you rise for the evening.
Yes. What is our status?
We are apace, my lord. The mercenary assures us we will be in Basel before long. An hour, perhaps 2. This weather is making travel very difficult. But rest assured, we will be there.
Of course. I trust you to lead the way, if this brigand is to be trusted.
Mateo nods. I will ride ahead, my lord.
Garamond nods, and then he'll shut the wooden clampers or shutters on the window before leaning back and making sure he has a good hold of both of his swords in hand.
Immediately, the wind dies down and becomes a bit quieter as you close the shutters.
He has both. He's gripping both swords in hand. Both are sheathed in scabbards, as they are too large and cumbersome to be worn on his person. So he just holds them together and leans back in the carriage, waiting for his companions to arise.
It actually doesn't take long at all before you see Bianca Dispenser beginning to stir, Giulietta de Florence as you knew her in life. Bianca, you begin to rise. Subtract a blood point from your pool as you awaken.
Bianca slowly emerges from her slumber. Her eyes flutter open, and she kind of tilts her head to the left, looking about where she is, and after a moment she gently pulls herself forward a bit, sitting up more properly in the seat, as she looks about and sees that only Garamond is awake. She takes him in for a moment, and I'm assuming it's pretty dark in the carriage.
Indeed, it is very dark, but your eyes have had plenty time to adjust. Even if you didn't use Auspex, you would still be able to make out dark shapes in the carriage. You see especially Garamond. You see especially much better now that Garamond has actually moved aside one of the black curtains covering the shutters.
Where are we? She says, kind of wary-like, her voice stretching out a bit as she looks towards the window at his side, seeing that it was somewhat disturbed, so he must have spoken to someone.
High up on the mountaintops, only an hour or two from Baselle. Shall be there soon. As he'll extend a hand to help you up into one of the seats, as almost a leverage to get yourself more comfortable.
She would take his hand and readjust herself a degree, and once she's more settled, she would pull her hand away and kind of adjust her skirts and her corset, and also the mink fur-lined cloak that she had placed upon herself before the voyage had begun, and she had taken her dress cap off before she had fallen asleep, so that is beside her in the seat at this moment, and she kind of gives Garamond somewhat of a nod. It's quite clear, usually when she first awakens, there's this kind of, her facade is very uncertain, and it's kind of expressed on her face that she is a little bit weary when first waking, especially in a place she's not familiar with, and people that she's only within the last week has, gotten to know. Sorry about that. I shouldn't say gotten to know, but re-entered into the world with, who she hasn't seen in several hundred years. So, except for, of course, Diego. But she adjusts herself accordingly, and that facade soon kind of washes away from her features, and she also, takes in a moment to collect herself and also make sure that she uses her obfuscate to turn into Bianca.
It's something you do reflexively, and Gehrman, I probably should have mentioned that the face you saw of the sleeping Bianca Dispenser was actually that of Giulietta de Florence. It was so eerie to you to see her that way after so many years, and yet you blink and then suddenly she's Bianca Dispenser again with an entirely different face.
Gehrman shifts his gaze from side to side as he looks at Bianca, only to catch himself staring, at which he quickly looks down and off to the side, as if not to imply being rude, as this is a concept he's still grasping.
And at that particular moment, it's just now that Valentino de Valle begins to stir. Valentino, go ahead and subtract a blood point from your pool and describe your awakening as the camera focuses in on you.
Valentino's eyes open slowly. He is slow to awaken. Wrapped in his wine-red cloak, he raises himself up and looks around, seeing Bianca and Gehrman, and then looking up to the security of their carriage. Good to see this lasted through the day. It's always nice to not awaken to daylight.
And as I mentioned before, the wind continues to buffet against the creaking carriage, and every once in a while a particularly strong gust will actually tilt the wagon one way or another. It would be a bit frightening, but you know that your ghouls have the situation well in hand and have been guiding the carriage along the mountain road.
Valentino continues to eye the carriage, still somewhat anxious about its integrity and structure given the movement from the wind, but his thoughts are assuaged in time as he looks to the others. Do we have any news?
Yes, I've spoken to Matteo. He informs me we are along the passage to Basile, about an hour or two out from our arrival.
He nods and remains silent.
And it's just at that moment that Diego de Vasquez de Sevilla begins to awaken. Diego, remove a blood point from your pool as you stir.
Diego, who looks almost beatific in death, takes on a much sterner expression as he rises from his slumber and looks around the carriage at the others. So we survived. Good. Where are we?
Gehrman kind of smiles as if sounding like a broken record over and over, just repeating himself, kind of reiterates. An hour or two away from Basile. We are currently still on the mountain pass.
Ah, good, then there's time. I did not get a chance to tell you last night, but I was able to meet this Madame Cloaca.
At this, Gehrman will kind of stiffen up and lean forward. You met with her?
It was quite by accident. I won't relay the circumstances, it wouldn't interest you. But suffice to say, she found me, and we had a conversation.
About?
First of all, about Baselle. The prince there apparently is a man named Manfred van Schoor, a rather skilled warrior. But she warned us that the forests surrounding Baselle are crawling with lupines. And we would do best to do our business in secret.
Gehrman's grip on his leather scabbards kind of tighten, and you can hear the leather kind of creak and move beneath his grip. Lupine.
You have dealt with these creatures, he says, looking at Gehrman.
Not personally, no. But I have spoken to many people, many other Canaanites about them. Namely, Lord Jürgen von Bergen, he has told me of them.
Perhaps you best share what you know.
Very little. No particulars. Although he did state that they are very, very dangerous. And that should we ever meet one, we should take it at the utmost precaution.
Very well, he says. And there is more. She seemed to know the location of the Black Monastery. And he'll let that sink in with them.
Valentino blinks a few times. I was led to believe this Toby Entwistle would bring us close to this. Wonder if perhaps he lied to me.
It is possible. From what she was saying, there are very few who know its exact location. Much less a mortal man.
That either he was lying or he has revealed himself suspicious.
Bianca would speak up at this point. Well, did she say how we would be able to find it?
It's in the Schwarzwald, north of Basel, on the slopes of Mount Doré. She did not tell me anything more exact than that, but it's enough to go on, I think.
Well, perhaps this Toby Entwistle can meet us there.
Perhaps we should find out how much he really knows. Since now we know probably more.
Valentino nods.
In any case, perhaps we can continue our discussion above. Our ghouls will need rest. It is only 2 hours, you say, from Basel?
Gehrman, his tension carries with him as he leans back and into the carriage. Approximately.
Time enough to give them a rest from the cold, at least.
I'm going to see about asking Mr. Entwistle exactly what he does know. And at this, Valentino rises to leave the moving carriage.
I would not have our ghouls rest, knowing that Lupine may be in the area. We must all be on alert.
And so they can, from within the carriage.
And as you rise, Valentino, to open the carriage door, actually the door is actually buffeted almost completely shut by the force of the wind as you suddenly open it up and catch, like the rudder on some sort of ship. The wind is the full force against the door. You actually have to steady your arm to keep it open as you climb out. Although the carriage is not moving fast enough that you're in any danger of falling or anything like that, you do have to hop and move at a trot so that you don't immediately fall down.
Dear Lord. These winds. Valentino will take a moment to look around and see if he can spot the others, Toby Entwistle in particular.
You immediately spot Toby Entwistle and Alfonso Cordon sitting upon the bucket seats of the carriage. They're both bundled up as much as they could possibly be against the wind. Gabrine is trudging on foot alongside the carriage, bundled up in his own clothing, kind of his hugging himself, trudging uphill against the wind, probably very miserable. And through the hailstorm and the snow and the swirling wind, you can just make out the faint outline of someone on a horse, probably Matteo, leading point. Toby Entwistle, in particular, is sitting next to Alfonso Cordon upon the bucket seat of the carriage. He has the reins in his hand, and he's doing a fairly good job of driving the carriage along, despite the wind and the inclement weather.
Valentino will first move to Gabrin, and once at his side, will motion to him to go inside to the carriage for some respite.
Oh, thank you, master. Thank you. He hugs you, actually bodily, and you see that he's actually frostbitten in several places on his face, his nose, his cheeks, which are ruddy and bright red. He immediately turns and ducks inside the carriage as quickly as possible, vanishing as he shuts the door behind him.
Following this, Valentino will try and catch up to be at pace so that he can yell up to Toby Entwistle. Mr. Entwistle.
Huh? He whirls around and glances down at you from his seat. Oh! Mr. Devaya. Pleasure? And he salutes you from his seat.
Indeed. You are leading us to the Black Monastery you mentioned? That is our destination currently?
No, I didn't say nothing about that. First we go to Basel. That's the first stop. Begging your pardon, sir, but we're all a bit tired, and some warm beds and good food would do us some good. They have fabulous inns there. Perhaps you'd like to benefit from some of the food there.
Perhaps, but you do know where to go after Baselle.
Make a perception empathy roll. Difficulty 7. Sure, he nods. I'll relay the results of that roll. All right.
Valentino studies the man as he assures him, unable to precisely pierce whether or not the man is completely genuine or not. Of course. Just making sure.
Rest assured, sir, we'll be in Basel before you know it.
He nods and then quietly falls back so that he can re-enter the carriage.
All right, we shift scene inside the carriage. And it's actually quite cramped in here with the addition of a fifth body, especially with the fact that Gabrin is so wet and covered in snow, which is quickly melting from the slightly warmer insides of the carriage. He has been unceremoniously relegated to the floor, bundled up and trying to get as warm as he possibly can. He's been walking for 8 or 9 hours upon this road in the weather, and he's definitely not happy. Although he is a ghoul and his strength has seen him through it. An ordinary man would have collapsed. but he is certainly happy to be in the confines of the carriage. The four of you actually have to rest your feet on him, however, as it is a very tight fit in here with 5 of you.
As soon as Gabrine sits, Bianca would lean over him a bit. Here, Gabrine, take off your hat and gloves. And she would kind of assist him in taking them off. And underneath the seats, there are actually underneath the seats that Gehrman and Valentino are sitting on, and also the ones that her and Diego are sitting on. Beneath them are 2 very thick wool blankets, and she would grab one of them and kind of take the time to like wrap it around Gabrine as much as possible, and making sure he takes off like the bare necessities and kind of puts them over to the other side of the foot of the carriage to dry, or at least somewhat dry, and not soak everything through, to warm him up as best as possible.
Gabrine is very grateful for your ministrations and attentions, Bianca. In fact, as you make an effort to comfort him, make a conscience roll, difficulty 8. I'll relay the results of that roll. All right. Gabrine smiles up at you, and he says, thank you, miss, thank you. He kind of bundles himself up and seems quite happy underneath the 4 of you of your feet. He doesn't appear debased or degraded at all at laying upon the floor, rather like a dog. He just looks happy to be out of the cold.
As he thanks her, Bianca kind of sits back in her seat, and there's somewhat of a dormant memory that comes flooding into her conscience of her son, and tucking him in when he was little. But as quickly as it comes, it vanishes, and she is pulled back to reality. And the reality is, at this moment, the Giovanni has somehow gotten hold of her son's soul and turned him back into a little boy, and there's a little bit of residual anger that kind of erupts in her chest a bit at that thought. But she holds her composure steady and gives him a solid nod before looking to the rest of them. And eventually she would speak up after a moment. Shouldn't the other ghouls take a rest?
As I said, their flesh is not as resilient as ours. Alfonso, for one, would appreciate one, I'm sure. I've known him long enough. I don't know about Matteo, and he'll actually glance at Gehrman. He seems to be made out of steel, that man.
He is indeed.
Bianca listens to the 2 of them talking, and eventually she kind of smirks at the 2 of them after a moment. Well, are one of you going to get out and offer?
Valentino should be back soon, and then we will do just that.
And then it's almost on cue, Valentino opens the door of the carriage, and he ducks inside. Valentino, you see Gabrine has taken his place on the floor beneath the feet of your companions as you climb into the carriage. And actually, as Valentino opens the door and enters, a gust of sharp, cold wind enters, and Gabrine tightens up instinctively, shivering, while the three of you feel nothing more than a cool breeze upon your cold, undead faces.
Valentino, as he enters, doesn't make to retake his seat. He'll... Well, I suppose if it's cramped enough, he might have to. But he does not mean to stay. He immediately breaks into discourse. I cannot read him. He seems genuine, but I saw something in his eye I did not trust. He says he knows the way to the Black Monastery, but I trust your information more at this point, Diego. We'll keep an eye on this Mr. Entwistle.
In the meantime, we were just discussing bringing them inside.
Garamond will hold up a hand to Diego. Just a moment, Diego. Then Valentino, please tell me his value. Was he not our guide?
Bianca would speak up. Garamond, don't be so harsh. He got us this far.
It's true he has been useful in bringing us at least to this destination, though for the last length of it, I do not know how much use he will have.
I agree, Bianca. He has done well so far, though the ultimate goal was to get us to the monastery, and if he does not know the destination and is willing to lie about it, he is no longer worthy of our trust.
In any case, we cannot have a confrontation here in the mountains. Let us wait until Baselle, where our ghouls can get rest and can handle this with more resources at hand.
Garamond kind of smirks. You act as if my turning on him would be a confrontation.
Valentino shrugs, passively.
Roll your wits streetwise, Valentino, difficulty 5.
Bianca would speak up at this point. Well, either way, I say at least 2 of you go out there and replace the ghouls that need rest so they can come into the carriage.
I will do so presently, Diego says, and he will actually get up to go.
As will I. I'd like to gauge Mr. Entwistle myself.
Valentino seems to turn his eyes about in thought. Without him, I do not believe any of us could actually drive this carriage forward. Regardless of his knowledge, which we may seem to have on either hand, we do need his skill at keeping us on the road at the very least.
And as you were all getting up, I presume, to depart, Valentino's statement actually cuts through your eagerness to spring to action. As anyone who does not have the drive skill, you know who you are, you would realize you have no idea how to drive this carriage, least of all in this sort of weather.
Well, that's when Bianca would speak up after a moment and kind of give somewhat of a laugh. Did you think I meant Mr. Entwistle? No, I said the ghouls. He can stay put where he is.
Still, it raises a good point. We could ghoul him, he says, looking at the rest of you. Then how could he beguile us?
Cameron pauses at a moment, looking at Diego. Interesting solution. I was just gonna hurl him from the mountain.
Valentino...
Bianca tries to hold back somewhat of laughter from that.
Valentino likewise smirks. I did offer him payment of some kind. I could do this task.
Bianca can't help but quickly and sharply look over to Valentino after a moment. Oh, you could handle this task, could you, Valentino? Just like you handled the task at the warehouse.
No, I think you handled that for us all when you murdered him.
When he speaks up, Bianca is subdued for the moment. She leans back in her seat and kind of stares forward, not responding.
Gammon's going to quickly move past Valentino to get out of the uncomfortable situation that has arisen within the carriage. And then he's going to climb up to sit in the bucket seat next to Mr. Entwistle.
All right, and as you enter the carriage, Gehrman, you climb up into the seat with Mr. Entwistle, and it's pretty cramped up there with the three of you, although seeing everyone get out, you see Alfonso Cordon very gladly get down from the bucket seat of the carriage and still bundled up and looking just as miserable as a man possibly could be, is looking for his master. He's shaking like a leaf in autumn.
Seeing Valentino Gehrman climb up to the top and knowing that there are two others up there already, Diego will wait down below, hoping that they'll send Alfonso down.
And Alfonso goes down. He spots you and comes up to you, hugging himself like a woman in grief, just shaking. Master! Ugh! You take me to such the most miserable places on this God's earth. Ugh! It is positively barbaric out here. Look! Look! He motions with one hand at the stretching wilderness and the wind. There isn't anything out here. Where are we going, Master? Sorry guys, wrong button. Alright. Where are we going out here?
To Baselle, and then to points north.
Is there at least writing in Baselle? Books? Perhaps a place where we are not all freezing to death?
From my understanding, it's quite a cosmopolitan city. You'll find everything you desire there. But for now, take this. And he'll actually pull back his glove and bite into his wrist and offer it to his ghoul. Heal the wounds upon your face from the biting wind.
Immediately, Alfonso, with very little shame or very little hesitation, he just grabs your wrist and begins sucking hungrily. He even stops to... He forgets to keep moving with the carriage as it begins to just very slowly trail and leave you two behind as he sucks hungrily upon your wrist.
He'll give him 1 blood point's worth and then stop him.
The moment you stop him, Alfonso always has that look in his face as though disappointed he didn't get more, but also understanding why a moment later, his loyalty to you refreshed as he... Thank you, Master, thank you. And you, even as you're watching him, you see the frost burn beginning to fade off of his face, a face that was chipped and scabbed, immediately falling away and smoothing over into that youthful face, a face that would have long been rotted away by death had you not sustained him for this many years.
Now get inside, get warm.
He nods and turns around to shuffle awkwardly off after the carriage. Alfonso's not a very athletic man, and against the wind, he looks very comical, his gait all akimbo as he tries to rush while holding his cloak around him.
Diego will actually stay behind a bit, trailing behind the wagon, just to get a good view of the entire collection of people here.
The camera's going to shift to Valentino as he's also exited the carriage, presumably, right?
Yes, Valentino will actually be looking for maybe a water skin or a free mug that they don't have to unpack. Anything like that available?
There's no containers really that are unpacked. You think there might be some sort of wine glasses or something within the carriage. It is a very fancy carriage, and amenities for drinks are probably provided in there.
Then he will go back in the carriage briefly to pull out a water skin or a goblet, something simple.
You manage to find a glass, a very sturdy, fine-cut glass, and it's fairly fine, as glass is still relatively rare, even in this late period of the Renaissance, only for the very wealthy. And you realize, just to the extent that Bianca went financially to procure these travel arrangements for the four of you. But taking the glass into hand, you do see Bianca kind of mothering the ghouls as they enter the carriage and begin to get warm again. Gabrine flashes you a goofy smile from the floor, quite content to be her little son for now.
Valentino sees this arrangement, and a weak smile appears on his face, but he takes the cup and leaves again. Once outside, he's going to fall behind a bit behind the wagon and draw his dagger across his wrist to bring a single point of blood into this goblet and cover it carefully against the wind with his hand and cloak underneath.
Make a dexterity athletics roll, difficulty 5. Although it is difficult to keep pace with the wagon and also cover up the cup while carefully draining your wrist into it, especially with the wind buffeting against you, you do manage to do so, Valentino, with your cloak whipping kind of behind you. Keep your balance and your footing upon the road.
With this, he will keep it concealed under his cloak, but walk alongside the wagon and yell up to Toby Entwistle. Mr. Entwistle.
Huh? He looks down at you from his seat, apparently eager to have something to look at other than Gehrman and his imposing company.
As soon as he has his eyes, he'll retrieve the cup from his cloak and tell him, "Have a drink." And on this word drink, he'll be using command.
All right, roll your manipulation intimidation. Difficulty will be 6. It's actually fairly easy to command him to do so. The minute you catch his eyes and tell him to drink, Toby almost automatically, without saying anything, he reaches down and kind of leans down from the seat, and he finally gets the cup as you offer it up to him, and he just throws it back instantly. His kind of hood falling back a little bit to expose the rest of his head to the air as he guzzles the blood hungrily and drinks that blood, which has gone cold so quickly, and was indeed even cold as it left your wrist. It's almost like a cold syrup as he drinks the vitae. And once it's all gone, he immediately stops. And Gehrman, you're able to see this most clearly as he looks down at the glass.
What the bloody hell? What was that?
He calls back to you, Valentino.
You look thirsty. Was a special reserve.
Well, whatever it is, it keeps me warm.
He hands the glass back to you, nodding in thanks, although looking very queasy and very strange. He has a very strange look on his face.
Can Valentino make any kind of perception empathy roll to see what or why he's feeling this? Or any details?
Yeah, perception empathy, difficulty 6. Alright, I'll relay the results of that.
Valentino takes the glass, keeping his eyes on the man the whole time. May have some more when we arrive in Basel. And then nods and lets the wagon pull forward as he moves to put the glass back where he found it, more or less.
Toby nods uncomfortably and turns away from you, leaning forward and holding his stomach with one hand, actually, from time to time when he doesn't have to actually take the reins into both hands, groaning and looking fairly uncomfortable. And you can see this as well, Gehrman.
Gehrman is going to be looking around at their environment, namely keeping an eye on Mateo up in the front, making sure he doesn't get too far, everything is okay up front, knowing that he'll signal in case he sees something.
Although it's difficult to see Mateo very clearly through the gale force winds and the whipping blizzard which is around you, you still manage to see him atop his horse some yards away. He keeps point and is your ever sure and steady guide, and you can't help but feel a bit of satisfaction in Mateo, while everyone else's ghouls are huddled away, being mothered by Bianca. Mateo stands at the front of you all and continues to take the wind on the chin and do his duty with a stiff upper lip. But with that, we are going to go into downtime as you journey along the road. Does anyone have anything they would like to do, or are we going to continue traveling by night?
Valentino will just be keeping a watchful, surveilling eye on the landscape, not exactly knowing what a lupine is, but knowing they sound dangerous, and just being on the lookout.
Bianca will probably be making small talk with Alfonso and Gabrine in the carriage. Nothing of importance, though. She keeps the conversation light as the howling wind outside beats on the carriage, and from time to time she would look outside and unlatch the shutters to see if she can spot anything. But for the most part, she would stay inside where it's dry and keep the two others somewhat entertained.
The ghouls prove for poor conversation, at least Gabrine does, but once you manage to get Alfonso to open up, Bianca, you do find that he provides for indeed very pleasant company during this ride, and you engage in long conversations on topics of import such as art and music, and he seems very happy to entertain you, to have someone to talk to on this long journey. And for the rest of you outside, it proves to be a much easier journey for you as you are undead, and even those who have to go on foot or who prefer to do so can do so with very little to no effort. Your undead bodies are fortified against exhaustion and the wind, and such vulgarities as mortals have to deal with, and you can't help but marvel at your unnatural strength as the night waxes full and the sun has dipped and vanished below the horizon. The moon begins to rise in the sky, and for the rest of your journey you march onwardly through the gale of the blizzard and the inclement and inconvenient weather as you ride onward towards Baselle. And with that, we're going to take an early break as we're 9 minutes away, and we got a big scene coming up. So go ahead and take 10 minutes, guys.
Woot.
Cool.
All right, be right back.
Can't have a pie without Cool Whip.
Oh man, I was like laughing when we were typing that stuff in there. Oh man, that's a good movie.
Why don't you go back to your home on Horror Island? Yeah, I love Anchorman. I'll be back.
That was funny when Valentina was like, well, I may have messed up, but you killed the guy. And she was just like, yeah. Oh, man. That was basically her saying, good point. And then she sat back in her seat. That was funny. Touché, touché.
All right, I'm back. Nice.
And I'm back.
I'm back.
Welcome back. Dude, playing vampire makes me annoyed to be in a living body. I'm just like, I know exactly how that feels when it's really cold out and then someone opens the door and you're like, God damn it.
Right.
Dude, tell me about it. Like when Gabreen shivered, I shivered.
I know. I'm
Like,
sitting
oh,
here like just holding myself.
Got like a sweater and a blanket. I was like, I'm fucking warm.
Yeah, if you could just picture that, what that would be like to have to march for 8 or 9 hours in a blizzard uphill.
Mm-hmm.
Both ways, it's terrible.
Right. But then again, he is a ghoul. He's got potence.
True.
Like I said, a normal man probably would have collapsed from exhaustion. But he's still miserable.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like I don't think being strong enough makes it less unhappy of an experience.
No, it doesn't. No, it sucks every inch as you think it might.
You gotta pay for that supernatural strength, though.
Right, I mean, he's how many years past his natural life? Quite a few.
Right? And now, Valentino can add Toby to his collection.
Back.
Welcome back, Scott.
Not sure Valentino's gonna want him in his collection.
Well, you could always let Garamond throw him from the mountain.
That was an entertaining option.
It was a great mental image, if nothing else.
I cackled a bit.
We have no driver, but damn, that felt good.
Guess we're gonna have to continue on foot. Come on, everybody. So yeah, Madame Cloaca provided some information. I don't know if you'd call it good news.
I like her.
It just confirmed what I was already expecting.
What?
Werewolves. I was like, there's no way there's not going to be werewolves on that fucking mountain.
That's an astute observation.
Yeah.
I like how in both games, Daniel, you have this like intense fear of werewolves.
I do, man. After that werewolf game that we played, now I know what they can do. No, man, I'm terrified of werewolves.
You are 200-year-old vampires, though. Just saying.
I don't know. Look what happened to Trevor
Right?
in my vampire game.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
I mean, I didn't, like, make him die. He just got bad rolls, and he was done. He's like a 300-year-old bourgeois.
Yeah, he almost killed her, though, to be fair.
Yeah, he did whoop on her.
That gangrel didn't last at all, though. He was a little snackins. She just freaking bit his head off in the first round.
He was a little snack, little appetizer.
Yeah, it was cool. Like, Candy was coming at him like a runaway freight train, and he was like, "Come on, you bitch!" And she bit his head clean off in the first round.
Oh, get wrecked. That's what I'm saying, man. When you're dealing with werewolves, the situation is very serious. All of a sudden, you better start rolling really well.
You can have all this potence and celerity and shit, but they've got rage and their natural strength.
Yeah, their
They'll keep up
natural
with you.
strength is more than mine. And that's saying something. Gammon's a strong fucking dude.
Although, as Victoria found out, Dominate's very effective.
Fucking A, it is.
You're fucking right, it is.
It took him several tries, or her several tries, to get it done, but eventually she got the bitch.
Well, Candy had really high willpower, too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, you told me about that. She just so happened to be a thurge.
It
Yeah.
wasn't as so happened. I built her before the game.
Well, I mean, so happens for him.
Try to dominate my werewolf, I'll make her a third.
I'll make her a third, motherfucker. No, it's just kind of funny how stuff like that works out. Oh, by the way, the one werewolf that you're gonna try and ghoul and your entire plan revolves around is a third, so she's got incredibly high willpower. You better roll well.
Victoria could have tried for her brother instead. His willpower was significantly less.
Yeah, but he wasn't nearly as good looking.
Yes.
She was shallow that way. I mean, she runs a sex club.
Yeah, I think it's funny how stuff like that pans out.
Oh, it worked out beautifully for Victoria. Yeah, she ended up becoming Archbishop of Las Vegas.
They readily wumped the Giovanni out of there too.
Oh yeah. Victoria showed up with her buddies and cleaned house.
To be fair, the Giovanni of Las Vegas are pussy whipped at best.
Yeah, that's true. She almost lost one of her ghoul Dobermans, though. It was scary. He took didn't he take like a full auto submachine gun?
Yeah.
Point blank range and rolled an amazing soak.
Hey, that was kind of like our werewolf game.
Oh no, that was much worse in the werewolf game, Daniel. She had like a freaking military grade assault rifle, like the kind you see Dolph Lundgren using in an action movie. Like, nice. That weapon would have shredded Victoria's dog.
But her doggy made it.
Yep. She was freaking out though.
My poopsie.
Basically. She's like half frenzying watching her dog get shot. Anyway, is everyone back and ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty.
Yep.
Okay, be back in a minute. Just kidding.
Damn it, Scott.
Pulling a Daniel.
Fuck you, Scott.
That is so
Fuck
a
you.
thing now.
Fuck you.
All right. Gonna open up our next scene. The camera opens as we pan high up into the sky, and we see the carriage that is rolling across the road, being led, flanked by dark figures on either side, and being led by a figure on horseback as they travel along that Swiss Alp road up into the mountaintops and move in that winding, snaking path as we go high up into the air and we see the blizzard consume them and white disappear, and suddenly we fade into sight of Baselle, the little village that sits nestled between France and Germany. It's a beautiful medieval city, not yet totally updated with the Renaissance, but gorgeous nonetheless. It's isolated from the winds which constantly assault the French Alps, or the Swiss Alps, I should say. And the buildings seem to be constructed in a defensive fortification style, recalling the days when walls were much more important. They're important still, of course, but otherwise it seems a peaceful little hamlet. Basel enjoyed relatively easy contact with Italy and was reputed to be home to a fine university staffed by such luminaries as Erasmus. Of course, you know that when the religious fervor of the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation in this particular part of Germany finally cooled, Basel was predominantly a Catholic city. During the 17th century, it's known as a center of industry for the productions of stockings, silk ribbon, tobacco, and snuff, as well as home to industries like wood carving. The Rhine literally runs through the middle of the city, allowing commerce and travel. Basel is suffering from a serious plague of witch hunts, however. And, of course, some of you may well forget that the witch fires are only about 4 years cool, and Switzerland was one of the true hotbeds of the witch trials. Of course, this is thrown into stark reality as you pass through the gates, welcomed by the sentries, and enter into the winding cobblestone streets of Basel. The buildings shield any traveler entering the town from the wind snow, but that is perhaps unfortunate for some. As the carriage stops and the four of you step out into the night and your ghouls begin to make arrangements to remain, or to procure the local inn and get unpacked, as the four of you step out into the night, you see there is a large crowd gathered near the town square. You see that there are people gathered all around, village elders, men, women, even a child or two amidst the crowd. And the camera's going to focus on the carriage as the Lambs of Isaac arrive in Basel, take in the sights of this German by way of French city, and see the crowd that have gathered in this dark night.
Do they appear to be waiting for us?
No, in fact, they're not. None of them are looking at you. Some of them, they are all looking off in one direction. It's kind of hard to see from this distance what they're all peering at.
As Valentino disembarks and sees this crowd, his eyebrows will raise a bit, somewhat leery of crowds of kind. Do not know if this bodes well.
And I should mention that many members of this crowd are carrying torches, which light them against the night, which is in full swing. Of course, there's a crescent moon in the sky, but it's very little light, and you can see that the crowd is mostly lit by torch fire.
This gives...
Gehrman.
Sorry, go ahead.
Gehrman's going to be jumping down from the bucket seat as he lands. The frost and ice and snow that had accumulated on his cloak kind of jerk off from the sudden stop when he hits the ground, as he appears wary of the crowd but continues walking around the carriage to open the door, extending a hand to help those out of the carriage.
And as you help those out of the carriage, you see Gabrine and Alfonso step outside. Alfonso, most of all, shrugging off some of the excess snow, which is packed in the secret places of his clothing, looking around and stretching.
My feet are killing me.
Gabrine smirks and immediately catches sight of the crowd, although he remains silent, looking far more interested in the gathering.
Diego is soon to catch up with the carriage, and he shakes off some of the excess snow and frost as well. His eyes are firmly planted on the gathering ahead, and he says, almost as if to himself, "This reminds me of something."
Last to exit the carriage is Bianca Dispenser. Bianca, as you step out into the night and take in Basel for the first time, the camera's going to focus on you.
Bianca would take Gehrman's hand casually, and pulling herself forward, she would take the steps needed to descend from the carriage itself, slipping her gloves upon her slender hands as she looks about, taking in the inn that they had stopped in front of, but also turning her face to the right and taking in the sight of the crowd that seems to be building on itself, and the voices beginning to become audible and louder in the crowd as they circle around something, but she's not sure what their focus is on. She is going to heighten her senses with her auspex.
And as you peer through the dark towards the torchlit crowd, Bianca, I will relay to you what you see.
Regardless of what this might be, we should make our presence known to the Prince von Schor.
Do you know where we may find him here in the city?
It's always the difficulty of coming to a new city, I'm afraid. I do speak German, however. It should make our passage easier. Although many of this part of the world, I think, speak Italian as well.
In any case, I believe this is your forte in dealing with matters of domain and princely topics.
Bianca barely catches what they say as she focuses in on what's going on in the crowd, and she can see over the tops of people's heads in the center where they're all surrounding is some sort of wooden poles, and it's poking up from somewhere, and it seems to be some sort of large stakes in the center. She eventually regains herself, though, and pulls her attention back to the others, quickly slipping the other glove. She had kind of hesitated for a moment, but slipping it upon her left hand. But she doesn't say what she picked up on over there. She's kind of wary of it. She has a feeling that it's obviously not something very pleasant. She knows that usually when there are wooden poles sticking up in the middle of a crowd, some sort of punishment is going to be bestowed upon somebody.
And the camera pans to Gehrman.
Gehrman just finished helping Bianca down, and as he holds the door out for the others to descend out of the carriage, he's looking with his hood up and a bit of cloth still covering half of his face. He is looking at the crowd and the wooden poles. He knows exactly what those things are for. So it puts him on a bit of uneasiness. He is standing there a little on edge.
Matteo, after making a once around the town square, trots over to you atop his horse and hops down to greet you, Gehrman.
We have arrived, my lord, but it seems the locals are restless.
See, as he peers around behind Matteo. Witches?
Most likely. This part of the country is full of witch burnings.
Of course.
Or it could be vampires.
Matteo gives you a dark look.
He kind of gives Matteo the same look and gives him a grim nod. Stay alert.
Shall I investigate for you, my lord?
Matteo glances back around at the crowd.
He'll glance at the crowd and around the buildings in the surrounding area. Yes, but do it quickly.
As all this is going on, Bianca, she's listening, but she also turns, almost forgetting her dress cap, and she reaches into the carriage to grab it from the seat, but as she does so, being mindful of the fact that they are around humans now, she will quickly flush her body with blood to appear more lifelike.
All right, Bianca, you lose a blood point as the blush of life begins to pink your cheeks and your hands and your arms. You still look very pale, perhaps even sickly, but you no longer look like death.
And as she feels the blood kind of emerge into her body and feels more comfortable with herself, she would pull back out of the carriage with her cap, and she would place it upon her head. Is it still snowing?
Very lightly. The storm and the winds are primarily blocked off from the arrangement of buildings around you in this square, and also the mountain as well. Baselle seems to have been built both with defense from the elements and from any bandits or raiders in mind. It's a very protective little hamlet.
Yes, she would place the dress cap back on her head and adjusting it accordingly. It is quite clear from her attire, she is still wearing the pink gown that she had sported the night before, that she is not from around here. If people were to notice her, they would know that her style is not familiar to these people, and if anyone with intelligence or knowledge were to come across her, they would know her dresses of English style.
No one here seems to know English from French, from Italian. In fact, these are very simple people. You can tell right away. They're all dressed very humbly, although they are carrying torches, and there's a cry that raises up from the crowd. You can't quite tell what's going on from this distance. None of you can, not without getting closer to investigate. Although you do see Entwistle dismount from the carriage and turn to the four of you.
Well, we've arrived. I will be going along to the local inn and perhaps booking some rooms, yes?
Bianca would give Alfonso a kind smile, but she waits for Diego to give his ghoul the order.
That's Entwistle, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. She would look to Entwistle then and give a solid nod to him with a gentle smile. Yes, that would be lovely, Mr. Entwistle.
Valentino interjects at this point. Common inn rooms may not serve our needs come the dawn. Perhaps we should look into more accommodating means.
Toby Entwistle looks confused, but Gabrine and Alfonso nod sagely.
What do you mean, sir? Do you mean for more privacy, or...?
Yes, privacy is exactly what I mean.
Very well. I will see what I can find as soon as...
And he rubs his fingers together, indicating money, looking at the four of you.
Valentino approaches Toby before the others can. You will be paid very well when we have arrived where we need to be. That is not
certainly, my lord. I meant for the innkeep.
Yes. Valentino reaches into his cloak to retrieve enough coins that he suspects would be sufficient to find more private lodgings than a common inn.
Certainly lavish enough to accommodate a place of such relatively simple but beautiful tastes as Baselle. And Entwistle, taking the coin, nods and turns to walk off in his roughshod boots and that lanky walk that he has about him, vanishing off down the street.
Before he goes too far, Valentino would look over to Gabrine. And you will go with him, won't you, Gabrine?
Yes, of course, master. I would be very happy to.
Gabrine nods and looks at you warily before turning to dart off after him, clearly still unsure of how things are between the two of you.
He lets this sit with Gabrine as he moves to follow Toby.
As all this is transpiring, Bianca kind of shrugs a bit at whatever course of action they feel necessary. A private estate, whatever Valentino wants, is fine with her. But also, she seems to be kind of interested in what is going on in this crowd, and eventually she would kind of make her way over to the crowd, kind of keeping her distance a bit, but it's quite clear she's curious as to what's going on, and her eyes would scan the crowd, looking for anything or anyone of interest, or even perhaps that she might recognize, though she highly doubts it.
The three of you see Bianca, quite unbidden, turn to approach the crowd and investigate further.
If Valentino notices that Bianca seems to be walking in that direction, he would call after her, "Do you really believe that is such a good idea?"
Bianca would catch Valentino's last words echoing over to her, and she would turn after a moment, looking over her shoulder at him a bit. And she's adamant to respond to him, but she doesn't feel it necessary and simply shrugs, turning back and looking to scan the crowd a bit and to see if she can get somewhat of a view of at least partially what's going on.
You hear a man raising his voice, which carries across the square, but there's so much noise from the crowd, Bianca, that you can't quite make out what he's saying. You can't see where the man is speaking from or who is speaking. It's really tough to get a beat on what's going on exactly without actually immersing yourself in the crowd to see what's happening.
Gammon's going to make his way over to Valentino to make himself quite close to get quite close to him. It would be a bad idea not to. Those seen shying away from the Lord's justice are presumed to fear it. We should all go.
Valentino looks to Gehrman and considers the words before replying, "I do not like the idea of such proximity to so many torches, you see."
Agreed. We will keep our distance, but we must watch.
Valentino is slow to nod, but he agrees eventually and eventually follows after Bianca.
And after a moment or two, as the others seem to be coming behind her, Bianca would kind of scan the crowd a bit and then take the initiative to immerse herself into the crowd. Her mink cloak dragging behind her as she kind of holds the front of it around her chest gently, and she would kind of actually make a beeline for close to the front to see. She wants a front row seat of what's going on here.
And what does Diego do is, actually the three of you see Bianca just head off right for a front row seat to what's going on.
Diego is concerned with the fact that she's getting so close to these mortals who are already on edge, so he will skirt the outer edges of the crowd, meanwhile looking through the crowd for other signs of vampires.
All right, and the camera pans back to Gehrman and Valentino, who are engaged in tense discussion.
Valentino, taking Gehrman's words, has also begun to skirt the crowd at the edges, if only to appear as part of the crowd.
Gehrman will do the same, although he will be looking out for Mateo to keep a sort of direct line so that he can see Mateo and that Mateo can see him, as if they are working the crowd together from different sides.
You think perhaps you can pick out Mateo, and you know his movements very well as he flanks the crowd and moves among them, as silent as a shadow. Bianca, however, you get a front row seat to everything that is going on, as such a well-dressed lady is given some birth from the peasants here and even some of the merchants. None of them stop you as you make effort to push your way towards the front, and even a few look curiously. As for Diego and Valentino, however, you manage to skirt the edges of the crowd and witness everything that is to follow, in which case we will swing the camera around to the gathering. The four of you bear witness to two stakes which are protruding from the ground, and two women which have been tied there. One a middle-aged, motherly-looking matron, and the other an old grandmother type. Both wear shifts and are barefoot and look as if they were just yanked out of bed. The old woman needs to be helped along by a guard. Both are led to the center of town where two pyres and stakes await them. The elderly woman accepts her bonds quietly and begins to pray fervently as she is tied to the stake by the guards. Alongside this gathering stands a priest and a judge. The matron, however, she has to be bodily dragged to the stake, screaming and thrashing in terror, and it takes several men and a few slaps to get her to stop struggling long enough to be tied. A grim-faced man, wearing the trappings of a judge, begins to read. The accused has been maintained their denials. The legitimate witnesses abide by their evidence, and therefore, this bishopric is prepared to abandon them to the secular court. Thus, they are to be delivered up as an impenitent heretic to the power of His Lord Majesty, the Holy Roman Emperor, and I will step aside now for the bishop and his officers give notice to the bailiff and the authority of the court. And at that, the man steps aside, and a small, reedy-looking man wearing the trappings of a judge makes a public proclamation, withdrawing a scroll as the women are held bound. On the appointed day for the pronouncement of sentence, we find ourselves gathered here together, that we, by the mercy of God, Bishop of such city, or judge in the territories of our prince, the Holy Roman Emperor, the people of Basel, have brought before an accusation of such heresy of these two women. Therefore, proceeding in every way, we are bound by the canonical decrees of His Holiness the Pope of Rome, and wishing to conclude your trial in a manner beyond all doubt. And at that moment, the crowd raises up and shouts, and torches raise and pitchforks raise. Between all doubt, we convened in solemn council, men learned in the theological faculty and in the canon and civil laws, having diligently examined and discussed each circumstance, and immediately the priest brushes the smaller, reedy judge aside. Enough of this! Burn her! Burn her! Cries from the crowd raise up, completely overriding the legal jargon as they begin throwing torches onto the pyres arranged for these women. And the flames begin to lick upward. And at that particular moment, the pyres are lit. Julieta, as the flame roars upward, make a courage roll, difficulty 8.
I shall use a willpower for this roll.
Okay. Well, then it's automatic success as you spend a willpower to kind of brace yourself against the flames as they leap up, and they begin traveling up the length of the wood that has been piled upon the stakes, not yet reaching the women, but The priest who is leading the chants of "Burn her! Burn them!" The crowd begins chanting, and the judge trying to shout over the crowd, "We find you beyond God's mercy! God help you!" as he withdraws small in the shadow of this fire. The old woman bows her head and clasps her hands tightly, and the matron at her side, just a few feet away, begins to sob hysterically, her tears wet and glistening upon her face as the fire climbs. The villagers stare at them, some with dispassion, some with hate. Those of you who are looking among the crowd might see a few who look sad or frightened. The pyres are lit. The smell of burning wood engulfs all of you, and the fires burn brightly for nearly 5 whole agonizing minutes. The dry wood flares, and the flame begins to engulf the old woman. She continues to pray frantically, but as the flames lick around her shifting legs, she turns her face upward and lets out a guttural scream of agony. She is soon joined by the matron, whose shrieks are ear-piercingly shrill as the flames lick upward over their shifts and cook their legs. The smell of wood is now mixed with the odor of roasting flesh. In the following 5 minutes or so of this hideous chorus of screams, eventually the old woman's chin drops to her chest as her hair takes light, and the flames consume all of her skull, swallowing them up both into flame as the matron continues to shriek until the flames climb up around her chest, and then she too falls silent. The crowd watches as the forms slump against the stakes, chained to them as they are, many murmuring or praying softly as the bodies slowly blacken and lose their human shape, slurries of cooked flesh dripping off of their legs as the smell of sizzling fat fills the air. And through this, Bianca, you have managed to stay near the forefront of it all. You look through the flames on the other side, and you notice, Bianca, a young woman enveloped in a black cloak standing on the other side of the pyre, away from the flames. The woman holds her cloak shut with one hand, the hood mostly covering her face. Her expression is mask-like, her grief betrayed by the hand tightly clutching her cloak. She meets your gaze, Bianca, as you look at her through the flames. And you think her face seems vaguely familiar, like something seen in a dream. Suddenly, as the flames roar up, catching anew, and when they die down, you see that she is gone. The camera pans to Bianca.
As all of this is happening, it did take her a minute to prepare herself for the flames, as all the torches were thrown and these women were engulfed, and the flames just roared uncontrollably onto this stage. But she held her composure intact, and as everyone began to roar in anger around her and screaming towards these women accused of witchcraft, she stood amongst them, staring onto the stage, taking in this horrific sight. And she, after several moments passed and others in the crowd began to bow their heads and pray, she too did this only for the sake of looking and blending in with the others. But she only prayed for a moment, for after she looked up once again and caught the sight of someone on the other side who through the flames, it was hard to see, but it did seem as though she knew this person. She kind of pauses a moment, taking this in, but just as quickly as she sees her, it seems as though she is gone, as the flames roar up and then die down for a moment, and she's not there anymore. She kind of narrows her hues a bit, and she would probably look about the crowd again, using her auspex to see if she can spot her.
All right, and as you heighten your senses and look about. It's very difficult to see anything past the smell of charred flesh and roaring smoke that is thick up into the night air in thick columns of black smoke, especially as they burn the hair clean off of the women's bodies. You see that whoever was there is gone, vanished into the night that hems in the village. The camera pans to Gehrman as he is circling about and taking in this horrific sight as these women are burned alive. And as the camera tightens in, what do we see?
Gammon has actually stopped moving at the very outskirts of the crowd. His body rigid as he watches the spectacle. His face, although half covered, is contorted. His eyes and brow are furrowed. He seems to be wincing or shaking. Very small increments as he's watching this. He seems to be haunted by the memories of the things that he has done, having put victims up there himself. He seems deeply troubled and very oblivious to everything else happening around him.
The camera pans along the crowd as we see Diego moving among the people and seeing what is happening.
Diego is indifferent to suffering of kind these nights. Or at least he likes to tell himself that. The smell of burning flesh, however, does touch a deep part within him, a memory of long ago, when he and his companions were attacked by the Inquisition on the road. He smelled burning bodies then, and he remembers getting ill. However, he forces himself to remain focused. Surely there will be faces among this crowd who will interest him.
And then we see Valentino emerge from the night and moving among the villagers of Basel as he sees this witch burning unfolding before him. The camera focuses in on him.
Valentino, his cloak and hood drawn up, if only to avoid the further agony of just watching these women burn, will be scanning the crowd at, in particular, the people who seem not angry but sorrowful or fearful, and he will try and focus his gaze upon those instead.
You see that there are very few, mostly children. You suspect perhaps these are relatives of the women who have been tied to the pyre. And yet, they stand by, unable to do anything. Eventually, as the four of you witness this witch burning and the bodies which cling to the stakes now are slumped over, charred and blackened into something unrecognizable, and the flames very slowly die down into a trickle, and it doesn't take long to do so, for once all the fuel has been consumed, there is nothing but the gentle wind of a mountain night as we see the crowd begin to disperse. And as they do so, they leave behind the Lambs of Isaac, who were left in the wake of this. Mateo standing amongst the crowd, looking grimly at the burning. And as they disperse to their homes, the blackened bodies on the stakes, you realize, look nothing like human beings, as the bones of the old woman slide down the charred stake as it cracks free with a sickling crackle. A character that was clearly devout in life as she prayed up until the last moment, and yet it wasn't enough. The rest of you are left in the wake of this, and as I said, the only ones to remain behind are the Lambs of Isaac and Mateo, but also the village elders, the priest and the judge, who gather around the pyres to confer with the trial. So the camera will focus on the four of you as you are left in the wake of this.
Gammon
Bianca,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that Bianca would probably stare methodically at the ashes and burnt remains of the two women lumped over on the stakes now. And she would probably stand there no more than another minute or two than the crowd who had just dispersed. But eventually she would tear her eyes away from it all and focus her attention on what she had seen through the flames on the other side, which is that woman who looked very familiar to her. And as she thinks about this, is there any way she can recall who this woman reminds her of?
To the best of your recollection, you don't even need to make a roll for it. No. But she looks like someone maybe you might have seen in a dream a long time ago. A face from your past, perhaps. You can't be entirely sure who it was. You didn't get that good of a look at her, cloaked and hooded as she was.
Yes, Bianca feels that this woman somehow looks very familiar to her, but she can't tell if it was the play of the flames or her own imagination. But she would circle around the stakes and the area where the heads of the town are still discussing what had transpired. And she makes a beeline around the stage and looking about, trying not to be too obvious that she's kind of looking for something, but she tries to see if maybe there's any footprints leading off somewhere that most people hadn't gone off to, or etc.
Oh, there's nothing of that sort. The ground is cobblestone, and you see no one.
So there's no footprints in the snow leading anywhere on the outskirts of the cobblestone?
Curiously enough, there isn't. And there probably should be if there was someone there.
She finds this a little bit odd, but she duly notes it in her mind, and eventually she would turn to see where the others are.
Gehrman has broken away now, being one of the first to turn away. He seems shaky and very uncharacteristically of his posture, very uncertain. His step is very shaky and wobbly. As he walks past a nearby building, quickly throws out a hand up to the wall to steady himself. His other hand shoots up to his head as he stands there, kind of hunched over, as if waiting to gain his balance.
And as you brace yourself against this half-timber building, Gehrman, you hear a familiar voice behind you.
Are you quite all right, my lord?
Mateo seems to have followed after you, looking at you with narrowed eyes for what passes for concern on his otherwise granite face.
Gehrman doesn't speak. He barely moves as the hand over his face, clamping part of his hood, can be seen shaking a little bit as he stands there and tries to gesture at what he tries to communicate as a nod.
It was the Lord's justice carried out. These women were witches, were they not?
Yes. Presumably.
Oh, who knows how thorough the judicial process is in this.
Mateo gets a disgusted look on his face as he looks around.
This backwater.
Gehrman still seems shaky.
Valentino, perhaps noticing this, if he did notice this, would approach Gehrman. Come, let's be away from this scene. I do not wish to tarry here in this. He loses himself in the thought as he turns back to the pyre. Perhaps Diego can help us with the prince situation. I do not wish to linger here.
And at that moment, the camera swings back around where Diego is left relatively alone before the smoldering, smoking stakes. Diego, you see Bianca approaching you from some far-off corner of the town square. The two of you meeting as you had seen Gehrman and Valentino congregating with Matteo against the far end of the street.
He will veer to meet her course. He wants to be away from this place as soon as possible.
As Bianca makes the steps needed to meet up with Diego, she would infer that they head over to where Gehrman and Valentino are standing. She's quiet for the most part, but once she reaches the others and the four of them are standing there together, she mindfully speaks up after a moment. Well, what a lovely introduction to this Baselle we've arrived in. She's kind of sarcastic as she looks over her shoulder at the burnt bodies on the stake, and then kind of looms her eyes back to the others. It's quite clear that out of all of them, this didn't affect her as much as it seems that it did to them. But that is also because it's quite clear that her humanity has far outstretched theirs. I mean, it's quite obvious that she doesn't really bat an eye to too many things horrific such as this anymore.
So Bianca is in earshot of Gehrman and Valentino as well now?
Yeah, she actually walked over with Diego and she said this out loud to everyone.
Valentino meets her gaze. A detestable town. I hope not to stay here very long at all.
You mustn't blame the townsfolk for the action of their church. Do you remember how the church was in our own time, Valentino? Perhaps worse than this, even.
Still, will blame them if I so please.
He shrugs. It doesn't seem to concern him much.
The camera shifts to Gehrman.
Gehrman seems to be taking his time as he rests himself up against the building. But after a short amount of time, he'll stand tall, as he is often seen, strong and sturdy, as he nods to the group and, "Come, we must not linger here then."
Matteo nods and seems intent on following you wherever you intend to lead.
Valentino.
Sorry, go ahead.
Valentino will turn to Diego, actually. Do you have any ideas where we might find the prince? Or they may hold Elysium here?
Each prince is different, as is each city. And as you can guess, it's difficult to find K-Knights if they don't want to be found.
Due to your unique knowledge of K-Knight's power structures within individual cities, you have some centuries of experience with this, Diego. I will permit you a perception architecture roll to take in the lay of the land and the town, and we'll see how well that goes, and then we'll continue from there.
However, he says, and he looks quite pensive as he looks out over the city. All right, which plus architecture you said?
Perception architecture.
Perception architecture, okay.
Difficulty will be standard. You have spectacular success in dissecting not only the structure of this town, but the shape and build of the different buildings, how high they are, how low they are, where they sit in relation to the street. You are very good at this sort of thing in discerning where the major thoroughfares of traffic might have evolved the town over time as it was built over the centuries. And you're able to pick out several buildings in the area. For, of course, even though Baselle is a medieval city, it's something you're familiar with cobblestone streets and these half-timber buildings. The evening streets, as you look around, are lit with the occasional lantern, although you see the wealthy who need to be out have lantern bearers to light their way. Mortal activity, though it has decreased considerably with nightfall, remains relatively active in the area. Taverns, inns, and some households are still awake with laughter and snatches of conversation from behind the shuttered windows. As you look around the town, Diego, and take all of this information in, make an intelligence politics roll. You will get an additional dice for every success on your first roll.
Difficulty?
Difficulty 7. You're kind of unfamiliar with this area. At least insofar as K-Night power structures. All right, I'll relay the results of that. All right, relay the results of that. And as the Lambs of Isaac remain in the shadow of that building, congregating in the dark street, we focus in on Diego, who is taking in the town with his glittering eyes in the night and considering all things, calling upon his centuries of accumulated knowledge.
Madame Cloaca was quite clear that there are few K-Nights in Basel. However, I know cities like this. I can see how it was built up over the centuries. And I know how K-Night minds work. If we're going to find another, I suggest we fan out and search the taverns of the city. That is where you will find the greatest accumulation of keen.
Valentino turns to Diego. Ah, there you now, you see? I knew you were good at something. He gives him a smirk.
Diego's brows furrow, but he gives Valentino no their satisfaction.
From your eye, Diego, you can determine that there are two primary taverns, each at opposite ends of the small village. You see that the tavern at the far end, further sharpened with your auspex, are greeted by... One moment. Okay, the first inn that you see across at the far end of the village is a very rowdy but dark and shabby-looking tavern with the image of a black dog on the sign outside, which in this time where most people can't read would be the Black Dog Tavern. Also, around the corner and further down towards the opposite end of the town, near the northern gate, is a much darker and much less populated tavern with a sign showing an eagle and a child.
If I were a betting man, I think the Black Dog would be the best bet. However, we should not rule out the other one across town there, and he'll point. Though less populated, that might be just what the Canuts of the city are looking for.
The camera pans back around at the rest of the Lambs of Isaac as they face this unfamiliar city.
Valentino follows his gaze and gestures these places before replying. I hate dogs. I will search the other.
Agreed. I will accompany you.
Then, Bianca, would you be so kind as to accompany me?
Of course, Diego. She gives him somewhat of a smile.
Mateo does not say anything, Gehrman, but you know that as night follows day, he will be coming with you. And as the two of you decide to split course, is there anything you wish to say to each other before you depart?
When and where shall we reconvene?
It's a good question. I suppose we could re-meet here, perhaps in an hour.
So close to these bodies. Distasteful.
Just meet back at the wagon. Gehrman spits out as he seems eager to leave, as he's already taken a few more steps towards the direction he intends to go.
Valentino looks back to Diego and nods in agreement.
Is Alfonso the one staying with the wagon? Because I don't...
Yes, Alfonso is waiting with the wagon to watch your things while Entwistle and Gabrine make the arrangements for wherever you're going to be staying.
Okay. Then Bianca would nod to this agreement.
All right, and with that, we are going to split our scene as we're going to first follow Diego and Bianca as they cross the courtyard towards the Black Dog Inn. The camera's going to follow the two of you as you cross the courtyard of Baselle and make your way through the little medieval town towards where you think perhaps your own kind might be lurking.
As they make their way, Bianca, of course, makes small talk as they head in that direction. The Black Dog Inn. What a blasé name.
You must remember that many of these people still do not know how to read. Pictures are the easiest way to communicate with each other. And what's more fun than a dog? I mean, just look at Gabrine, and he'll smile devilishly.
Bianca holds back some laughter, though it does kind of creep out of her lips at this comparison. But eventually she would nod to Diego at his response. It is quite sad. I can't imagine not knowing how to read.
We wouldn't get much done, would we?
Not much at all.
I do enjoy the quaintness of this city. I wonder how the prince will be taken with us, coming as we do from larger metropoli.
Bianca thinks on this a moment and then shrugs. I do feel like princes are all the same. And as she says this, she looks over to Diego with a small smirk. Of course, I don't include you in this, Diego.
I was going to call you a cow. And he smiles again. You can tell he didn't mean it as an insult.
Yeah, she kind of gasps a little bit, but then she smiles and elbows him a bit.
Well then, shall we put on our serious faces?
Bianca would take her hand and kind of wave it over her face, rather theatrically, of course.
And Diego too puts on his stern face, the very same that he uses at court. That frightens so many.
All right. And with that, we're going to change scene. And actually, give me 1 minute, guys. My audio file I prepared for this is not working. I'm going to have to re-upload it real quick.
Right you are. I want some milk anyway. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Someone's talking mad shit about my Gabrine.
We only tease.
Back.
Welcome back.
Sorry, guys. Give me 1 second.
I'm not sure if any of you know this, but the Black Dog is actually a brand on Martha's Vineyard.
And it's also a subline of White Wolf for adult games.
You caught that.
I love Freak Legion. What can I say?
I know. I'm just tickled that you got that. That was a little. I think I'm clever, bringing all these nods in, but people are always like, "Yeah, that's what that means." I'm like, it does. +1 XP to you.
Someone's always there to be like, Simpsons did it.
No, it's very cleverly spotted. I'm thinking about awarding like bonus experience for stuff like that.
Damn it. Now I gotta study.
You can tell I'm the only girl in this group because, of course, the only thing I related it to was a clothing brand. I'm like, yeah, that's a clothing brand. Did you know that?
Hey, Lois, what's going on here?
Oh, it's my book club, Peter. Come, join us.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Peter.
All right, sorry guys. 1 more minute. Technical difficulties.
I love the two, the barons back and forth between Valentino and Bianca. That was great.
Wait, when did we do that? When
when you were in the carriage and you were
Oh,
just like,
yeah.
oh, kind of like when you failed, Valentino. And he's like, yeah, kind of like when you killed him. It was like, he
Yeah.
was like, hiya, hiya.
I know, and at that point she was like, touche, touche, and she sat back in her,
She just
in her
sits
seat.
back. You dick.
She's like, shut up, under her breath.
No. Sits back. No.
Oh, that was one time. Shame. Loading a shotgun.
Shame. I laughed so hard when I saw that. Because that's exactly what it was. You're just like, oh, what a shame, as we're like preparing to like kick their ass. I love that movie.
Yeah, me too. I'm such a nerd. I know all these pop culture references.
That's why you're the Toreador.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Can you see Diego getting involved in anything like that? I don't think so. Hey guys, come to my new rave club.
Oh my gosh. If he has a rave club in the future, I'm pretty sure Julietta would be like, what are you doing with your life?
Right.
Don't you think I look good in all leather?
She'd be like, Diego, snap out of this.
You're having a 4th century crisis.
Can't see you through all my glow sticks.
All right, guys. So we are back up and running and ready to get into this scene.
Cool.
So as the two of you enter into the Black Dog, Bianca and Diego, the two things that catch you immediately is the number of people in this room as you look around, and also the music. There is a musical act of some sort, a woman singing on stage alongside a minstrel as they play a sleepy tune. And as the woman begins to sing in French, there's something immediately that captivates you, particularly you, Diego. You have to make a self-control roll, difficulty 8, as soon as you hear this woman singing and you see her on stage with this minstrel.
Oops. That was not the right roll, actually.
Okay.
Same result, though.
You completely... Well, I will leave it to you as the camera pans to Diego.
Even in this crowded room, Diego's eyes are immediately drawn to this stage and this beautiful singing voice that he hears there. From the outside, it wasn't as captivating, but in here, he can't help himself. And Juliet has seen this look before, once when he was staring at the stars. He's become lost within the music.
Immediately when Bianca looks over to Diego after they enter, and she sees him just transfixed upon this this minstrel and her voice, she looks over to the minstrel once more, and then looks over to Diego, and yes, he is absolutely correct. She can recognize right away that he is in some sort of trance. And she would kind of like bump his shoulder a bit and kind of tilting her head. Diego, love, trying to get his attention.
He shows no reaction at all to her prodding. And there's a small smile creeping across his face. Almost dreamlike.
At this point, Bianca kind of rolls her eyes a little bit. she knows that he's probably not going to be much use to her now, so taking matters into her own hands, she would kind of hold on to Diego's arm, kind of wrapping her arm with his and guiding him towards a free table to kind of sit him down on.
He'll allow himself to be guided only if it doesn't interfere with his ability to hear the music.
Indeed, it does not, and it's relatively easy to find an open table, as most people are on their feet listening to this gorgeous woman who is, nonetheless, you can see mortal. There's nothing supernatural about her voice. She's just very lovely, and she has a very captivating voice, something like the like of which you haven't heard in many, many decades. And as you sit him down, Bianca, the camera is going to go with you briefly as you are apparently left to your own devices to search out this tavern.
Yes, Bianca makes sure that Diego is able to sit at a table and even have a view of this woman. It's quite clear that is what is transfixing him in this moment. She kind of sighs as she looks him in the face, and then eventually she straightens herself up. And she would look about the room. I'm assuming her Auspex is still active.
No, we're in a new scene now, so you would have to activate the different levels of your Auspex, whatever you would like to use.
She's going to use the first level. I always forget the names of these things.
Heightened Senses is the first level. Aura Perception, I think, is the second one.
Yes, she is just going to use Heightened Senses first.
As you sharpen your senses and look around your room, you smell the familiar smells of a tavern, the yeasty smell of beer, and the press of unwashed bodies in a small space. You don't smell or see or hear anything that might indicate vampires, however, as you scan the room. Although you haven't been in here very long. You could make a more thorough investigation of the room or do something else.
Bianca would take in her heightened senses for a moment, realizing that she's not picking up on anything irregular at first. She would look back to Diego and obviously in a joking manner she would speak to him, even though she knows he won't be able to hear her most likely. I am going to get you a drink. How about that? And she smiles at him, even though he is gone from this earth at this moment. And with that, she straightens herself up once more, and she kind of rummages her way through the crowd and through the tables to make her presence known over at the barkeep and the tender, who is most likely watching over it.
And as you approach him, Bianca, you can smell something on the bartender. You can smell... Actually, make a perception awareness roll. Difficulty 7. I will relay the results of that. As you approach the barkeep, you see he's a relatively simple man with a barrel chest and thick, brawny arms covered in coarse, dark hair like the trunks of young trees as he cleans out a pewter mug, looking you over, a faint smirk, but looking slightly suspicious. You are dressed very nice, much nicer than anyone here.
As Bianca approaches, she would take the corner of a stool and set her tiny little bottom upon it, and taking in the sight of the tender as he looks over to her and assumingly comes over to her, she would immediately, once he gets closer, smell a very distinct smell, and she is quite keen on the smell. It's quite obvious that it is Vitae. And as she observes him more, she's going to converse with him, but she's also going to activate Read the Soul.
All right, go ahead and make your roll. I forget what Read the Soul is.
It is, I think, perception, empathy. I think. No. Yes.
Yes, difficulty 7.
Okay.
All right, I'll relay the results of that.
As she takes him in, though, and he makes himself known to her. An ale, please. And then, as she says this, she thinks better of it. Actually, what is your finest alcohol beverage you have here?
Pardon? He frowns. Well, Monsieur, Mrs., I have very little here that would appeal to a woman of your breeding, but perhaps I have some wine in the back. It's old, but I would not serve you this coarse local barley ale.
She kind of gives him somewhat of a weak smile, but nods. Yes, would you please? A fine wine would do.
The bartender ducks around and produces a dusty bottle from the back, emerging after a moment. And you can't help but look towards the woman who is singing on stage. She is very lovely unlike you've seen in a long time. Not just her voice. She appears, she's got lovely blonde hair, a very young, youthful, oval face, which is smooth and free of any imperfection. She has very good teeth and full brown eyes. It's just a very lovely French rose singing. It's hard to take your eyes off of her, even though she is only just mortal. Diego certainly is enraptured. And as the bartender from the back brings the bottle, he uncorks it and pours into a wine glass for you. Immediately you smell the aroma of blood, Bianca, as he pours this wine for you.
I think perhaps this should be good for your palate, eh?
Bianca takes in the smell of the Vitae, and she pauses a moment before lifting her heavy lids up to the tender. What an inquisitive man you are, she says, and places one of her arms against the bar side itself, looking him over once more.
And if that is to your like, I think perhaps Master Von Shaw at the back of the tavern would like to have a word with you, miss.
And he motions towards a dark, enclosure at the back of the tavern, one you had previously not seen, for most of it had been hidden behind curtains. You see a gathering of people in that rather enclosed room, moving like caged wolves. You recognize their demeanor as Canaanites.
Bianca takes in his words, and her eyes kind of scan over to the corner where he is directing her to go. And she looks back to the tender after a moment. This gentleman's name again? What was it?
Manfred von Schor, madame. He is as you might say, the authority in this area.
Ah, she says, lifting her chin to some degree. And eventually she would look back over to Diego, who's just sitting there like, just like a cute, dumbstruck little puppy. And she knows that until this woman stops singing, she's not going to be able to pull him away. So she would look back to the tender a moment. And your name, sir?
My name is unimportant. I am Marcel. Miss, thank you very much for coming in to patronize our humble tavern here. I know you must be very tired from your visit. However, the journey here could not have been easy. From
his eyes linger on your clothing.
England?
She would kind of study him a moment. She sees the color of his aura to a degree. And she would nod, looking over the vitae in her glass once again. Yes, that is where or should I say my husband is from, but I have traveled from Rome recently.
I see. Well then, bienvenue, and welcome to Basel.
The man nods, clearly eager for you to move on. He seems a bit nervous in your presence, clearly knowing very well what you are.
And she can kind of read that she's making him somewhat uncomfortable. So eventually she would stand and and take the glass within her hand. But before walking off, she would address him one last time. Mr. Marcel, would you be willing to watch after a friend of mine? He seems rather transfixed on your minstrel singer on the stage. And she would kind of turn and point over in the direction of where Diego was sitting.
Ah, yes, your companion. I see he is very taken with our new act this evening. I'm very happy that she's lovely, no?
She is. Does she have a name?
I do not recall right offhand. I know that Master Van Schor acquired her from somewhere in Avignon. She's a very famous singer there, and wanted to bring a bit of life to his court here. He is very isolated from the centers of civilization, as you can see.
Yes, of course. She nods somewhat, looking back over to Diego a moment. Anyhow, you will be a good lad and watch after my friend, won't you? He is a very dear friend of mine, and I would hate for anything to happen to him. And there's kind of an icy undertone at the end of that. She's not threatening this man, but she's also letting him know that this is a dear companion of hers, and if anything were to happen to him while she is gone, that might not be very good.
The man lowers his hand, or Marcel lowers his head humbly and accepts criticism as he nods. I assure you, madame, I shall take care of him as if he were my own. He is a customer in my establishment. I promise to you, he will come to no harm.
Very good. Thank you, Marcel. and I shall join those who await me, I suppose. She gives him somewhat of a gentle smile before pulling away from the bar altogether and making her way to the back area. But she is casual as she walks. She doesn't hurry along, and she is mindful of her surroundings as she goes in this direction. She keeps her aspects up at all times, and she just takes in what's going on as she heads for this back room.
And as you turn and head towards the back, you see that there are actually four individuals back here. They seem to be enjoying the music. Some of them are accompanied by glasses of blood, which you can very clearly smell coming out of their cups. But the one that catches your attention is Manfred von Schor, a tall, thin man with a tired, bearded face. He sits with his back to the wall, surrounded by the three of his court. You see there are two men and a young woman in blue, all wearing a disc around their necks. The only man that is not wearing a disc is Manfred. The disc in particular is a pewter amulet with the heraldic design of a black rose being drawn through a golden bow. They all seem to mark out either property of his or members of his court. You can't tell which, but they are vampires, all of them. Manfred von Schor is an interesting fellow. He looks you up and down as you enter as though he expected you to come in. And the moment you walk in, you get a better look at him. You see that Manfred von Schor, the reputed Prince of Basel, is a tall and thin man with a tired and bearded face. He carries himself like a warrior and immediately stands out, fond of wearing armor from ages past, despite becoming more and more an anachronism with every passing night. He is dressed more like a medieval soldier than a man of the Renaissance. You realize that while only a handful of kindred exist in his city, probably decimated by the witch hunts, you see immediately the ones in his company, those who remain, clearly defer to him. He nods and stands from his seat for a moment.
I always stand for a lady in my presence, though a newcomer to my domain is another story.
Manfred von Schor nods and bows at the ways to greet you, Bianca.
As Bianca enters, she stops, keeping somewhat of a medium distance between her and the three of them. And as Manfred von Schor stands and addresses her, she too would bow, very ladylike in manner, eventually straightening her posture to look at the three once again. My lord, thank you for the invitation. And she kind of lifts her glass to a degree.
Indeed, Mrs. Welcome to Basel. We are very happy to have you here. Please take a seat. I trust your companions will be joining us soon. I was informed of your arrival. Though how you knew to find me, I'm very impressed.
Bianca would give them a gentle smile, kind of assessing the situation. She feels as though this is a rather peaceful encounter, so she would take a moment to meet them, taking the few steps needed to head over to where they are, and if a seat is offered, she would take it.
And it is indeed offered to you. In fact, one of the men get up from their seat and give you theirs. The others in Manfred's company are fairly quiet. They don't seem interested in you. The woman in blue was previously clinging on to Manfred's arm, although she has extricated herself from him. Manfred resumes his seat at the center of the little enclosure at the back of the black dog and sits in the chair more like it was a throne than a seat of anything else. And as he looks you over, he frowns. "So, what brings you to Basel, madame?"
Bianca would, she'd keep kind of looking down at the vitae. She hasn't taken a sip of it yet. Actually, she's kind of taking her slender index finger and spinning it round and round the top edges of the glass as she looks back to Von Shore after a moment. "Well, I do apologize, my lord. I don't believe I've made myself known to you. I'm Bianca Dispenser, and you are quite right. I did travel with a group here. My comrades, one of which is very transfixed in the bar side over there by that beautiful woman on stage. But, as you did mention, you do wonder why we found you so quickly. I travel with the prince. The Prince of Seville, Diego. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's a Spaniard, but he's quite educated on architecture here."
Von Shore looks incredibly amused for some reason as he smiles on a face unaccustomed to smiles, heavily scarred and tired though it is. "Then the expense was worth it to bring Sophia here so far if she can captivate the attention of a prince. It seems she is getting two for her money tonight, eh? Well, she was a good choice. I have heard tales far and wide of Sophie Ducot's beautiful voice from far away as Avignon. I have not been to France in a century or more, and I had to hear her voice for myself. We get so very little entertainment here in Basel, as you might imagine. We are a rugged group of kindred Canaanites," he corrects himself. "I never know what the Camarilla prefers these nights. We are far removed from any politics, as you might imagine, but it does come at the cost of being bereft of any good entertainment. This is a treat for my court," he motions to the woman on stage. "I brought her here at very great expense. But, as I said, I am glad to hear your friend enjoys her. As to your business, Bianca, you have yet to state it, and while I admire your way of meandering around the primrose path, I must ask that you state your business. It's the first thing to do while in my domain, and while I never want to stand on ceremony, you understand."
"Yes, of course, my lord. Well, my companions and I are searching for something. I believe it is called the Black Cross."
"The Thieves of the Black Cross? Well, that is just north into Germany. I believe the lord there is one... what was his name? The Prince of Magdeburg. He's the child of a potent prince of that region. Well, you are journeying to the Black Cross, stopping in Basel?" Manfred looks at you shrewdly.
No, I apologize. Though I am quite familiar with the Black Cross, I meant to say the Black Monastery.
And immediately, as soon as you say that, everyone in the room turns to look at you. All the vampires in this little enclosure look at you very steadily. Manfred looks at you with his glittering eyes in the shadowy recesses of where he's holding court, looking at you for a very long time before he smirks very slowly. I see. So you are with them?
Them, my lord? She kind of leans forward questioningly.
The Cainites up in the monastery. Their activities seem to have... Well, whatever's going on up there has the lupines skittish and looking for targets. I have been trying to shut down the lupine agitation for weeks. We've already had an attack in my city over what's going on up there. I do not know myself. I have never seen any of those creatures come down from their ivory towers to mingle with us lowly Cainites here in Basel. But they are angering the local wolves, you understand. And so if you are with them, madame, and a dangerous edge comes into Manfred's voice, you had best tell me.
Bianca holds herself intact as he addresses her now with a very seriousness.
And as you stand before Manfred's gaze, Bianca, make a courage roll, difficulty 6. Alright, I've sent the results of that.
Bianca does take in his stern disposition, and he is quite serious on the matter. But she does not fray away from his dominating words towards her, and in fact she would lift her chin to some degree, speaking quite clearly to the prince now. I can guarantee you, my lord, me and my companions are no way near connected with the people we believe are in that monastery. And she kind of gives somewhat of a disgusted look as she says these last words. Thinking about the Giovanni, it's sometimes hard for her because she's very personally invested now because of Arnaldo. And after she says this, she would look back to him after a moment. We are looking for a small group of vampires who, as I'm sure you know, since you have given me some information, are quite devilish in a manner. And we believe they are residing at the monastery now. That would explain the lupine problem you are encountering.
Well, I know nothing of that, nor is it my business to do so. If a group did pass through here, they did not stop in Baselle, and Basel is, of course, my domain. But if they did pass by here, it would explain the agitation in the local lupine activity, which I've had to work very hard to keep tabs on, I assure you. My court is very small here, but we are all battle-hardened survivors, both the witch fires and the wolves. I lead this place more out of necessity than out of any desire for praxis. It is either to band together in Basel and endure, or to fall into the fires of the claws of our enemies. But of course, none of that helps you, Manfred says in a very matter-of-fact way. But he says briskly, if you are interested in investigating the events that are happening at the Black Monastery, of course I will give you free rein to pass through my domain and stay here for as long as you need. On One... He pauses for a moment as if to consider the wording. One condition.
Yes, my lord?
When you do make your way to the Black Monastery, I want you to tell them that Manfred von Schor says if any of them ever deign to come down from their mountain top and walk amongst the rest of us in Basel, to immediately come to the Black Dog and introduce themselves post-haste. And immediately that dangerous edge enters his voice again. I will not be held responsible for what happens to them.
As Bianca takes in his words, she finds it kind of, not humorous, but amusing. He reminds her of Gehrman a bit. And in the back of her mind, she wonders if he too is a bourgeois. The bourgeois, which are far and few between, but the ones she has encountered in the last 200 years, they all always have this faint similarity about them, this very aggressive nature. And she notes this, but quickly to reside with what he had spoken about, she nods graciously. Of course, my lord. I will be sure to pass the message along to them.
Excellent, he says without expression. Then welcome to Basel. There are a few things you must know about my city before you go about your investigation. The first is that the university, all churches, and this tavern are designated as Elysium, a custom that we picked up from France, which is circulating Camarilla cities. We are Camarilla, make no mistake here. But we are not going to go to any great lengths to trouble ourselves over much with formality. Life in Basel is very different than what you are accustomed to in Rome, I am sure. Also, and this is very important, the Eagle and Child Inn across town is to be avoided, as those lupines who venture into town go there. This interview is at an end.
As soon as he says the name of the other inn, Bianca abruptly sits up and realizes that Valentino and Gehrman have walked right into the very inn that he has just warned her about. And this alarms her to a degree. But she looks back to him and gives a solid nod. Of course, my lord. Before looking to the others who surround the prince in this room. She was not introduced to them, but to be quite frank, she doesn't feel the need to be introduced to them. And eventually she would stand after a moment, looking down at the vitae in her glass. And she kind of she's always been a little bit hesitant about drinking this the whole time that she's been sitting here conversing with him, but as a show of respect and perhaps maybe even some trust into the fortunes of her party staying here in his domain, she would take the glass and drink it down.
Manfred waits for you, an edge of impatience in him, and as the rest of his court stare at you, they're clearly waiting for you to leave as you've been dismissed.
And after she finishes the glass, she would walk over and place the glass on a sideboard, before looking over her shoulder, licking her lip of any blood that might have slipped from the glass itself. Have a good night, my lord. Before bowing and exiting the small room, making her way back into the main fold of the tavern.
Manfred nods, and the curtain is quickly and swiftly shut behind you as you finish your audience with the Prince of Basel. And with that, the music is going to fade out on that terrifying and somewhat disturbing note. We shift scene, as we go to Valentino and Gehrman across town.
And can I just say, before we do that, I mean, after hearing that information, I'm pretty sure Bianca's going to be trying to grab Diego and kind of rush out of there as quickly as possible to try and catch them.
Diego won't go. In fact, he'll fight you if you try to drag him out.
Darn it. Well, then, if he's not going to come, she's going to head over there.
Okay. But not... It's too little too late. As all this has been going on, they've been over at that tavern.
Oh, yes, of course I know.
So we're gonna find out what happens. As they... As they walk into the Eagle and Child Inn, we see Gehrman and Valentino enter the room. Gehrman and Valentino, the two of you have crossed town, and it was a much shorter walk to the Eagle and Child from where you were standing to where Bianca and Diego went. As you enter the room, you see that there are only a few people in here, many of them ragged. The floor is covered in old straw. There's a broken table at the far end of the room. It's not peopled by many people in here. In fact, the few men in here look wild and feral, and there's something stormy in the eyes of the man at the bar, who turns to regard the two of you as you walk in. Both of you immediately make wits awareness rolls. Difficulty 8. All right, I'll relay the results of that.
Based on this information, is Valentino smart enough to deduce or connect the dots of what they might be?
Let me check your... do you have any dots in occult? Let's see. How many dots do you have? No, you have no idea. But you feel what you feel.
Okay. But definitely something supernatural, at least.
Fair to say that, yeah.
Valentino kind of pausing a moment as he enters and getting this sensation, a pretty powerful sensation. He kind of brings a hand up in a pacifying manner, but as much to Gehrman to stop him and as to the bartender who looks at him, sensing that he may be able to assuage the tension, and knowing that perhaps he's already speaking to the other side of the masquerade on some level. Good evening, gentlemen.
Several of the men in the room look like rough mountain folk. They don't look like town folk at all. They're burly and broad, and there's, like I said, there's only a few in this room, maybe 3 or 4. But the man behind the counter is really what catches your eye. He has eyes that look like stormy, and there's something about him which really, really draws your attention. The camera shifts to Gehrman as Valentino greets everyone.
Gehrman sees something in the man that is dangerous and deeply concerning as he sees this in the man. He is then immediately aware of the other people in the room, and he makes a slow turn to gauge them out of his peripherals, not wanting to move too quickly. But he immediately feels as though they've walked straight into some sort of trap or ambush, and his body is tense and rigid, as if preparing himself for the moment that things might go awry.
Valentino, make a charisma etiquette roll. The difficulty will be 9.
As soon as he enters, he wants to make use of presence first. I'll make that roll.
Okay. That'll be a blood point and charisma expression. Difficulty 7.
And he's using this odd to make himself seem generally more agreeable or amenable to speak to.
You seem to captivate some of the rougher-looking men at the far end of the bar, but the man behind the counter looks completely unfazed by your power. In fact, it seems to affect just about everyone in the room except him.
You said charisma etiquette after that?
Oh yeah, still 9.
But I do gain my dots and presence to this roll, right?
What, charisma etiquette?
As I understand it, rolling awe, you gain your dots and presence to subsequent rolls that make use of it.
Not to the man that matters that you need to impress. He was not affected by it.
Alright, fair enough. He will be spending a willpower on this, though.
Got it.
It doesn't matter.
So
It's
because
not
of
a
the
botch.
because of the willpower, it's not a botch. But it's not a success. So what happens next is the man behind the bar puts the rag down. No one says anything. He puts the mug down. And he had been leaning on the bar up until that point. He stands upright, and he's a decently tall man. Garen's a bit taller than him. But as he walks around the bar and he approaches you, you see that he's wearing simple rough-spun clothing, and there's something very burly and hairy about him. As he approaches you, one moment. Yeah, as he approaches you, you hear the cracking of bones, and you see the stretching and popping of muscles, and you hear sinews and tissues grinding beneath in his body as he actually gets taller approaching you. You've never seen anything like it, and his eyes become almost luminescent yellow, like balefire looking at you, as he walks very directly towards you and Gehrman, where you stand in the doorway. He actually grows about 1.5 feet in height as he walks up to the two of you. And before you know it, he's looking down at you. In about 3 seconds, he put on about 65 to 75 pounds of muscle. And about 1.5 feet of height, like I said. He looks down at the two of you, imposing, broad and powerful, as you see fur sprouting across his beard and cheeks as his sideburns elongate and his jaw cracks and it elongates and his teeth become just a bit sharper looking down at the two of you.
What are you doing in here, leech?
Valentino.
And with that, the scene ends. As we fade out on that cliffhanger.
Oh, God.
Oh, please don't. Don't do this to me.
Oh wow, that's really bad.
Please.
Well, it's 2:00.
I don't care. Does everybody else not care? I can't go a whole week like this. Oh my god.
Valentino trips Gehrman and runs.
Trips Cameron.
Yeah, that's not good.
It's okay. We're not quite in it yet. I might get something off.
I mean, you didn't botch. You did. A botch would have been bad. It would have been bad.
Meanwhile, Bianca's like, shit, I gotta get over there before our welcoming stay. We got thrown out of this damn village.
Well, here's the thing. Right about the time Diego is going into La La Land at the Singer, that's when this was happening.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
She's gonna get there. You guys, there's gonna be nothing left.
Yeah, by the time you get there, the shit that's gone down has already gone down.
Yeah, it's gonna go down. Whatever's
Either you're gonna walk into our pile of ashes, or you're gonna walk into a room full of dead werewolves.
Well, I will say, based on your rolls that you guys got, the only guy who appeared really threatening was that guy that approached you. Everybody else appears more or less human to you, although you really don't know.
Appearances can be deceiving. But even one werewolf, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
It's bad news.
Does he? I can't believe he's gonna do that stuff in front of humans.
I don't think I think he knows what we are when we walked in.
Well, yeah, you both look dead as hell. You didn't use any blood.
And you guys, I'm making you pay for that. You may not know it, but because you guys aren't spending the blood to flush your tissues, yeah, he knew just by looking at you were vampires.
You look like corpses. I look like I'm walking around with a corpse, Diego.
Although, to be fair, he probably would have smelled you anyway.
Yeah. Knowing what a werewolf can do, flushing our blood would not have done anything.
So yeah, that's our cliffhanger for this week. I know you.
Can we
snaps.
keep going?
It's not. You guys want to keep going?
No, cliffhanger, good.
Scott, please.
Cliffhanger, good.
I can't leave it like this.
All right. So I will keep going if all four of you want to keep going.
The fights take forever.
Well, there might not be a fight.
Let's hope not. German's pressed for one now.
I mean, Valentino is about as socially proficient as any of you guys. I mean, he is really good in social situations, and even he couldn't work that one out. I mean, it's vampires and werewolves, dude. It's fire and gunpowder.
I know. Well, maybe he can negotiate our way out the door.
Maybe he can, whisper sweet nothings in his ear as we're backing out.
You gotta have faith, baby.
It's like we just gotta let him just not kill us, not decide to fight us.
I feel like if I can get the words, we're trying to stop the Black Monastery out, just fast enough, maybe.
That's the
There's a Black Monastery, don't kill us.
I'm willing to continue to see what happens, but I just, I'm sure Bukhar has some things to do for his game and stuff, so.
I just need to eat something and go to the bathroom.
Yeah, we're gonna stop here, guys. I know, I'm sorry, Daniel, but it'll be there next week. You'll have something to look forward to.
Now I know what to do to keep him on the edge of his seat. Cliffhangers it will be.
4 hours should be more than enough to get some eats. We could take an hour and a half to.
I take a long time to eat, Daniel.
It's okay, Daniel. You're just gonna have to let this.
Dude,
one.
I can't do it. I can't do it.
All right. So we're gonna go into experience. Be quiet, Daniel. Sit down.
I can't sit down. I'm standing up in my room right now.
Come
How
on,
can I
man.
switch to another game now? My mind is like so in this.
It's okay.
Oh,
We've been through thicker shit than this, I think.
Why is it always a fucking tavern? Every time.
I mean, you
Gar-
guys could
Garmin
have gone
needs
to
to
the
stay away
Black
from taverns.
Dog.
Oh, I hate dogs.
Garmin needs to stay away from fucking taverns. We hate dogs, so that's why we chose the one with
That's
vampire
right. For
werewolves
some
in it.
reason, it's like you guys had that big fight in the tavern like 200 years ago, right?
Yeah.
You guys fought your sires. It was always a tavern, yeah. That's kind of funny. I didn't realize that.
When they talked to Durga Sin, she should have just looked at Garmin and been like, "Stay away from taverns."
All right, guys. So 1 point of experience all around. And I think we've had some very nice developments this week. You guys made the journey to Basel. Diego met an enchanting mortal. Bianca had a chance to interact with the prince. And we see Gehrman and Valentino in all kinds of hot water.
God damn.
But we're gonna play it out. We're gonna see what happens.